Hello and welcome back to Module 7, Malware Threats. Having reviewed and considered the various ways that a system can be penetrated or breached and exploited, we now turn to the next big topic, which is what kinds of malware are out there that we know of and what can they do to the system that you are trying to protect. So let's take a look at this broad topic, which certainly has a lot to consider. Our module objectives for Module 7 include understanding malware and malware propagation techniques, understanding advanced persistent threats and their lifecycle, overview of Trojans, their types and how they infect systems, overview of viruses, their types and how they infect files, overview of computer worms and fileless malware, understanding the malware analysis process, understanding the different techniques to detect malware, and finally, understanding different malware countermeasures. So let us get started. Our module flow is such that the first part of our overview has to do, as always, with concepts. So let's take a look at malware concepts. Introduction to malware. Malware is a malicious software that damages or disables computer systems and gives limited or full control of the systems to the malware creator for the purpose of theft or fraud. That is not entirely accurate. The malware creator may not be the person using it. There's a lot of malware that is on sale on the darknet, so the person utilizing the malware may have actually purchased it, not themselves created it. Anyway, that's a minor point. Examples of malware include Trojans, backdoors, rootkits, ransomware, adware, viruses, worms, spyware, botnets, and cryptors. Different ways for malware to ingress or enter a system. There is instant messenger applications, portable hardware media removal devices, browsers, and email software bugs, insecure patch management, rogue decoy applications, untrusted sites and freeware web applications and software, downloading files from the internet, email attachments, network propagation, file sharing services like NetBIOS, FTP, SMB, installation by other malware, and Bluetooth and wireless networks. I would like to add to that number 13. Even in an air-gapped system, it is possible to install malware with a surreptitiously installed USB download. So even that can be overcome despite the fact that the system itself is air-gapped. Common techniques attackers use to distribute malware on the web include the following. Black hat search engine optimization, ranking malware pages highly in search results. Social engineered clickjacking, tricking users into clicking on innocent-looking web pages. Spear phishing sites, mimicking legitimate institutions in an attempt to steal login credentials. Malvertising, embedding malware in ad networks that display across hundreds of legitimate high traffic sites. Compromised legitimate websites, hosting embedded malware that spreads to unsuspecting visitors. Drive-by downloads, exposing flaws in browsers, software to install malware just by visiting a web page. And spam emails, attaching the malware to emails and tricking victims to click on that attachment. Components of malware are several. The components of malware software depend on the requirements of the malware author, who designs it for a specific target to perform intended tasks. They are as follows. There are cryptors. A cryptor is software that protects malware from undergoing reverse engineering or analysis, thus making the task of security mechanisms harder in its detection. There's a downloader, a type of Trojan that downloads other malware from the internet onto the PC. Usually attackers download software when they first gain access to the system. A dropper is a type of Trojan that covertly installs other malware files on the system. An exploit is malicious code that breaches the system security via software vulnerabilities to access information or install malware. There's the injector, a program that injects its code into other vulnerable running processes and changes how they execute to hide or prevent its removal. Obfuscators, a program that conceals its code and intended purpose via various techniques and thus makes it hard for security mechanisms to detect or remove it. A packer, on the other hand, is a program that allows all files to bundle together into a single executable file via compression to bypass security software detection. Then we have a payload, a piece of software that allows control of a computer system after it has been exploited. And finally, we have malicious code, a command that defines malware's basic functionalities, such as stealing data and creating backdoors. In our module flow, the first thing we're going to look at this time is APT concepts, Advanced Persistent Threat. What are advanced persistent threats? Advanced persistent threats, APTs as they are called, are defined as a type of network attack where an attacker gains unauthorized access to a target network and remains undetected for a long period of time. This can be even up to years in some cases. The main objective behind these attacks is to obtain sensitive information rather than sabotaging the organization and its network. Information obtained during APT attacks include classified documents, user credentials, personal information about employees or customers, network information, transaction information, credit card information, organizations' business strategy information, and control system access information. Characteristics of advanced persistent threats are the following. Objectives. Typically, the objective in APT is obtaining sensitive information or fulfilling some political or strategic goal. Timeliness. Time taken by the attacker from assessing the target system for vulnerabilities to gaining and maintaining the access. Resources. The amount of knowledge, tools, and techniques required to perform an attack. Risk tolerance. Level up to which the attack remains undetected in the target's network. Skills and methods. Methods and tools used by the attackers to perform a certain attack. Actions. APT consists of a certain number of technical actions that cause them to differ from other cyber attacks. And attack organization points. Numerous attempts to gain entry into the target's network. Just a caveat to that, there have been cases of APTs being a chained exploit, in which case one APT triggers another, and there could be several nodes in that chain. Continuing with the correct characteristics of advanced persistent threats, we also have numbers involved in the attack, the number of host systems that are involved in the attack. Knowledge source, gathering information through online sources about specific threats. Multi-phased. APT attacks are multi-phased, which include reconnaissance, gaining access, discover, capture, and data exfiltration. This is not to be confused with the previously mentioned chained attacks, which are self-contained modules activated in sequence. Next, characteristics of advanced persistent threats include tailored to be vulnerabilities. These include APT's target-specific vulnerabilities present in the victim's network. Multiple points of entry. The adversary creates multiple points of entry through the server to maintain access to that targeted network, hoping, of course, that some of those points of entry will not be detected. Next, there's evading signature-based detection systems. APT attacks can easily bypass the security mechanisms such as firewalls, antivirus software, IDS, IPs, and email spam filters. In some cases, especially with antivirus software, this is accomplished by using polymorphic codes. Specific warning signs, specific indications of an APT attack include inexplicable user account activities, the presence of backdoors, unusual file transfers and file uploads, and unusual database activity, etc. An advanced persistent threats lifecycle, as we see here, starting in the quadrant on the upper right, is preparation. This is to define the target, research target, organize a team, build or maintain tools, and test for detectability. Next, after this has been accomplished, we have initial intrusion phase, which is the deployment of the malware and establishment of outbound connections, typically through a backdoor. Next, we have expansion. Once we have gained access, we expand our access in order to obtain credentials or other information. Once we have expanded our access, we want the persistence in order to maintain the access. And as I mentioned with APTs, this could be months or years even. And next we have search and exfiltration data, and perhaps most importantly, cleanup to cover the tracks of the malware and to remain undetected is a priority task for any good hacker. Trojan concept. What is a Trojan? It is a program in which the malicious or harmful code is contained inside apparently harmless programming or data in such a way that the code can get control and cause damage, such as ruining your file allocation table or on your hard disk. Secondly, Trojans get activated when a user performs certain predefined actions, and upon activation, it can grant attackers unrestricted access to all the data stored on compromised information systems and can cause immense damage to those systems. Next, indication of a Trojan attack include abnormal system and network activities, such as disabling of antivirus and redirection to unknown pages. Lastly, Trojans create a covert communications channel between the victim's computer and the attacker for transferring sensitive data. How do hackers use Trojans? In many ways. Trojans can be used to delete or replace critical operating system files, to generate fake traffic to create the DOS attacks, record screenshots, audio, and video of a victim's PC, use victim's PC for spamming and blasting email messages, download spyware, adware, and malicious files, to disable firewalls and antivirus, to create backdoors to gain remote access, to infect victim's PC as a proxy server for relaying attacks, to use the victim's PC as a botnet to perform DOS attacks, and next we have to steal personal information, such as passwords, security codes, and credit card information. And lastly, to encrypt the data and lock out the victim from accessing the machine, as is the case, of course, in the famous and very, very popular ransomware attacks, which we will look at later again. Common ports used by Trojans are in the following tableau. Needless to say, this is not exhaustive, and Trojans can use other ports, but these are the predominant ones. Just to take a close look at this, WannaCry and Petya, some of the most pernicious malware ever released, usually were on port 445. Also, we have Deep Throat. That was on several ports, 2140, 3150, 6670 to 71. And we also have Gate Crashers, interestingly, port 6969. And we also have Zeus. And the Zeus botnet is one of the early malwares, and very much proliferated, and it usually resided on port 8080 or gained access through port 8080. There are many types of Trojans. Trojans are categories according to their functioning and targets. Some of the examples include remote access Trojans, backdoor Trojans, botnet Trojans, rootkit Trojans, e-banking Trojans, point of sale Trojans, defacement Trojans, service protocol Trojans, mobile Trojans, IoT Trojans, security software disables Trojans, destructive Trojans, DDoS attack Trojans, and command shell Trojans. Fairly self-explanatory what each of those subcategories does. How to infect systems using a Trojan. As we see in the diagram above and also the flow chart below that, the first step, of course, is to create a new Trojan packet. Secondly, employ a dropper or a downloader to install the malicious code on the target system. Next, you employ a wrapper to blind the Trojan to a legitimate file. I will go into that in more detail shortly. Employ a crypter to encrypt the Trojan. Again, same idea there, is essentially to obfuscate or spoof. Next, we have propagate the Trojan by various methods, followed by deploy the Trojan on a victim's machine by executing a dropper or downloader on the target machine. And lastly, execute the damage routine. And we see the appropriate flow chart that these steps spell out on the bottom. So we have the first step, creating a Trojan. What does this involve? Trojan horse construction kits help attackers construct Trojan horses of their choice. The tools in these kits can be dangerous and can backfire if not properly executed. There is the Trojan horse construction kit, typically as we see in lower left quadrant. The Trojan horse construction kit includes CENA spy Trojan generator, batch Trojan generator, and Umbra loader, a botnet Trojan maker. On the right side, we have the Dark Horse Trojan virus maker. Dark Horse Trojan virus maker creates user-specified Trojans by selecting from various options, thereby, of course, automating the task and making it much easier to create said malware. Employing a dropper or downloader. Droppers do one thing, downloaders something quite different. In the case of a dropper, it is used to camouflage the malware payloads that can impede the functioning of the targeted systems. Droppers consist of one or more types of malware features that can make it undetectable by antivirus software. Also, the installation process can be done stealthily. Next, Emotet dropper and Dridex dropper are some of the famous droppers that attackers employ for deploying malware to the target machine. Dridex has a long history. It's regularly updated. It is used primarily by Russian hackers in order to hack banks. So it is a very, very powerful and well-designed bank hacking Trojan. Next, we have downloaders. Downloader is a program that can download and install harmful programs like malware. A downloader does not carry malware of itself as a dropper does. So there is a possibility for a new unknown downloader to pass through the anti-malware scanner. And last, on the downloader side, we have Godzilla downloader and Trojan downloader are some of the famous downloaders that attackers employ for deploying malware to the target machine. Employing a wrapper. A wrapper binds a Trojan executable with genuine looking .exe applications, such as games or office applications. When the user runs the wrapper.exe, it first installs the Trojan in the background and then runs the wrapping application in the foreground. Attackers might send birthday greeting that will install Trojans that the user watches. For example, a birthday cake dancing across the screen or something else that could get the user's attention. One quick note on this, on nomenclature or terminology, we do not want to confuse this wrapper with an encryption wrapper where an encryption key is embedded into another encryption key. Typically, this involves something along the lines of asymmetric public key encryption being used to transfer a symmetric key. Thus, the first case is the wrapper. Next, we have iExpress Wizard. iExpress Wizard wrapper guides the user to create a self-extracting package that can automatically install the embedded setup files, Trojans, etc. Wrappers include the following: Elite Wrap, Advanced File Joiner, Soprano 3, EXC2 VBS, and Cryptomatic. Employing a cryptor. Cryptor is a software used by hackers to hide viruses, keyloggers, or tools in any kind of file so that they do not easily get detected by antivirus. BitCryptor is one of the popular ones, and it can be used to encrypt and compress 32-bit executables and NetApps without affecting their direct functionality. I would hazard to conjecture that it's also been updated to also compress 64-bit executables. Various cryptors that are used include Sway's cryptor, Aegis cryptor version 1.5, Hidden Site cryptor, Battleship cryptor, Heaven's cryptor, and Cypherx. Propagating and deploying a Trojan. One way to do this is to deploy a Trojan through emails. As we see here in the diagram, we have the victim receiving a doctored or altered email, thus enabling the attacker to get into the victim's system. Major Trojan attack paths include the user clicks on a malicious link or the user opens a malicious email attachment. Typically, these are further disguised in order to be as enticing as possible. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of emails were spoofed and sent out by hackers, and they had something like, open this attachment for newest information, virus now, is much more toxic and spreading faster. And needless to say, many people got scared and did open that. So this is one way this is done. Again, the so-called malware infested emails can be quite creative and interesting, to say the least. Propagating and deploying a Trojan. Continue to deploy a Trojan through covert channels. Attackers can use covert channels to deploy and hide malicious Trojans in an undetectable protocol. Covert channels operate on a tunneling method and are mostly employed by attackers to evade firewalls that are deployed in the target network. Attackers can create covert channels using various tools such as Ghost Tunnel version 2, Electric Fish, a North Korean tunneling tool. At the bottom again, we see a small flowchart showing exactly how this process works with an attacker using a malicious server to penetrate the firewall. Because a covert channel remains undetected, then it infests the target server and from there attacks the intended target. Propagating, deploying a Trojan continued. Deploy a Trojan through proxy servers is another method to deploy Trojans. In this case, attackers compromise several computers using Trojan proxies and start using them as hidden proxy servers. The attackers have full control over the proxy victim systems and can launch attacks on other systems from the affected user's network. Attackers use this to anonymously propagate and deploy a Trojan onto the target computer. If the authorities detect illegal activity, the footprints lead to innocent users. Thousands of machines on the internet are infected with proxy servers. Once again, we see a simple flowchart on the bottom, starting with an attacker using a compromised proxy server, going through the internet, and finally attacking the intended company. Next, in the deployment scenario, we have to deploy a Trojan through USB or a flash drive. Attackers drop the USB drives on the pathway and wait for random victims to pick them up. By pathway here, we mean nothing technical. We mean these USB drives are simply scattered, for example, in the company's parking lot, waiting for a curious employee to pick it up and, of course, open it just to see what the hell is on there. Next you know, the Trojan has been successfully installed on the company's network. Once the USB drive is picked up and inserted in the target system by the innocent victim, the Trojan is propagated onto the system and is automatically executed, thus infecting the compromising system and network. Furthermore, on this point, I've seen a lot of creativity used by the attackers. For example, they try to label these scattered USBs that hopefully will be picked up by the victim with enticing titles like company salary schedules or company promotion schedules. Anything like that, of course, would be bound to pique the curiosity of an employee. And once again, as mentioned previously, with USBs and flash drives, which you physically insert through the system, even an air-gapped system is going to be vulnerable because your ingress has nothing to do with the internet. It has to do with just an external device being deployed. Continuing with deploying a Trojan, we have techniques for evading antivirus software. Again, these are many. Break the Trojan file into multiple pieces and zip them as a single file. This is sometimes known as fragmentation. Always write your own Trojan and embed it into an application. Change the Trojan's syntax, as we see, the two different or several different ways to change that. Change the content of the Trojan using hex editor and also change the checksum and encrypt the file. And never use Trojans downloaded from the web. Antivirus can detect these easily. So once again, you typically want to customize and custom create your Trojan and fine tune it to be as effective as possible without being detected. Next, we have exploit kits. An exploit kit or crimeware toolkit is a platform to deliver exploits and payloads such as Trojans, spywares, backdoors, bots, and buffer overflow scripts to the target system, amongst others. Exploit kits come with pre-written exploit codes and therefore can be easily used by an attacker who is not an IT or security expert. Comment on this. These are a dime a dozen on the darknet. So oftentimes people with little or no knowledge of cybersecurity or hacking can buy these and deploy them quite successfully by buying them on the darknet. Here again, we see the flow chart, starting with a victim. They visit what they think is a legitimate website. The legitimate website, in fact, is compromised or hosted, and this compromised web server is then something that redirects the victim through various intermediate servers, such that victim lands on an exploit kit server hosting the exploit pack landing page. Finally, the exploit kit gathers information of the victim and delivers the exploit. Exploit kits continued. RIG exploit kit, RIGEK, was used by attackers for distributing CryptoBit, CryptoLuck, CryptoShield, CryptoDefense, Sage, Spora, Revenge, PYCL, Matrix, Philadelphia, and Princess ransomwares. So we see that exploit kits are very, very popular ways to try to get a ransomware into a system. RIG, RIGEK, was also used in distributing LatenBot, Pony, and Ramnet Trojans. With exploit kits, you're looking at the Magnitude, the Angler, the Neutrino, Terror, Sundown, and many, many other names. They are constantly being created. Next, we're going to take a look at virus and worms, perhaps in cybersecurity terms, the most ancient of malware that came along a long time ago, like 20 years ago. So let's take a look at these ancient relics, but are still very much used and very useful. Introduction to viruses. A virus is a self-replicating program that produces its own copy by attaching itself to another program, computer, boot sector, or document. Viruses are generally transmitted through file downloads, infected disk flash drives, and as email attachments. Indications of virus attack includes constant antivirus alerts, suspicious hard drive activity, lack of storage space, and unwanted pop-up windows. Viruses are some of the oldest malware artifacts on the internet, going back as far as the early 1990s with such viruses as the Michelangelo virus and worms such as the I Love You bug. Indications of virus attacks again include the following: constant antivirus alerts, suspicious hard drive activity, lack of storage space, and unwanted pop-up windows. In addition to that, another telltale sign that your machine might be infected with a virus is it generally tends to slow the machine down, in some cases egregiously so. The characteristics of viruses include infect other programs, they transform themselves, encrypt themselves, alter data, corrupt files and programs, and they self-replicate. Purpose of creating viruses is to inflict damage retake. The purpose of creating viruses is to inflict damage on competitors, financial benefits, on vandalism, to play pranks, to research projects, cyber terrorism, distribute political messages, damage networks or on computers, and to gain remote access to a victim's computer. Here we can take a little bit of a look on the working of viruses. First of all, we can take a look on the left side, which is the infection phase. The infection phase of virus includes the virus replicating itself and attaching to an exe file in the system, as we see in the left side diagram of before infection and after. There is a start of a program and an end of the program, which is embedded and self-contained in that exe file, which has now been infected. On the attack phase, the viruses are programmed with trigger events to activate and corrupt systems. Some viruses infect each time they are run, and others infect only when a certain predefined condition is met, such as a user-specific task, a day, a time, or a specific event. Such was the case again with the so-called Y2K virus. Unfragmented file before the attack, we see over here on the right side, and then the file becomes fragmented due to the virus's attack. Two things to note about viruses, which are unique. One is they require some type of carrier, as we said, is some type of file or executable, and they usually or almost always require the host machine to trigger the virus to start replicating. This is not the case with worms, which are independently self-replicating, do not need a carrier, and can again trigger themselves or start spontaneously without anybody triggering them. How does a computer get infected by viruses? Many methods. When a user accepts files and downloads without properly checking the source, that would be one. Again, the file or the download would be the carrier for the virus. Opening infected email attachments, installing pirated software, not updating and not installing new versions of plugins or other methods for the virus to infiltrate the system. Also, not running the latest antivirus application, which is a given to basic self-maintenance and basic routine preventative maintenance on any system, is to get the latest antivirus on there. Clicking malicious online ads, using portable media, connecting to untrusted networks. Slight comment as number 5 there. Even if you do run the antivirus applications, which our latest studies show that at best only about 37% of viruses are caught by the antivirus, because since the antivirus was created, thousands and thousands of new viruses have been also put into the stream. So they are only marginally effective. Types of viruses. There are many. Viruses are categories according to their functioning and targets, and include some of the examples as I'm about to list. Again, these are not all, this is not an exhaustive list, but the major categories of viruses include system or boot vector viruses, file and multi-party viruses, macro and cluster viruses, stealth tunneling viruses, encryption viruses, sparse infector virus, polymorphic virus, metamorphic virus, overwriting a file or cavity virus, companion camouflage virus, shell and file extension virus, fat and logic bomb virus, web scripting virus, email and armored viruses, add-on and intrusive viruses, direct action or transient viruses, and terminate in state resident viruses. Some of the most toxic ones that I see here are encryption viruses, and polymorphic viruses are historically very difficult to detect, followed by stealth and tunneling viruses, also very difficult to detect. Ransomware. Ransomware is a type of malware that restricts access to the computer system's files and folders and demands an online payment to the malware creators to remove the restrictions. This is at this time the most ubiquitous, widespread type of malware out there. Ransomware at this point is stealing millions and millions of dollars from victim companies all across the world. One type is called Dharma. Dharma is a dreadful ransomware that attacks victims through email campaigns. A ransom note asks the victims to contact the threat actors via provided emails, addresses, and pay in Bitcoin for the decryption service. Ransomware families include Cerber, CTP Blocker, Sodinokibi, BitPaymer, CryptXXX, CryptoBit Ransomware, CryptoLocker Ransomware, Crypto Defense Ransomware, CryptoWall Ransomware. Some of the more notorious ones that have of late been active include Petya, and also the other one that seems to be very well known is the one called WannaCry. WannaCry allegedly was essentially malware that was surreptitiously, secretly stolen by insiders in the NSA, known as the shadow brokers. It was then auctioned off on the dark net. Allegedly, North Korean employed hackers got their hands on this, and they used the Eternal Blue implant in this ransomware and deployed it worldwide. It was known again, popularly known as WannaCry. Other types of ransomware include CEHv11 is a new ransomware that specifically targets Linux devices and QNAP network attached storages by employing the AES encryption technique. AES stands for Advanced Encryption Standard. It's one of the strongest standards out there. So if this type of malware encrypts your system, chances are next to impossible that you will ever get the data back unless you pay the ransom. On the right, we see SamSam. SamSam is a notorious ransomware that has infected millions of unpatched servers by employing the RSA 2048 asymmetric encryption technique, also very strong encryption. How to infect systems using a virus. Creating the virus. A virus can be created in two different ways: writing a virus program or using virus maker tools. As we see on the flowchart beneath, we have a virus writing program. You create a batch file, game.bat with the text as shown. Next, you convert that game.bat batch file to a game.com using .bat to com utility. Next, you send that game.com file as an email attachment to a victim. And finally, when run, it copies itself all the .bat files in the current directory and deletes all the files in the Windows directory, thereby causing enormous damage in some cases. How to infect systems using a virus? Creating a virus using a virus maker tool. Virus making tools include Babesh Virus Maker, SKW, Deadly Virus Maker, Sonic Batch Virus Maker, Terabit Virus Maker, and Adrianic 05's Batch Virus Maker. Dell ME's Batch Virus Maker creates viruses that can perform tasks such as deleting files on a hard disk, disabling admin privileges, and cleaning the registry and killing tasks. On the other hand, we have the JPS Virus Maker as shown in the caption or screenshot on the right. How to infect using a virus? Yet another method, propagating and deploying a virus. There are virus hoaxes, which are in fact false alarms claiming reports about a non-existing virus that may contain a virus attachment. There are warning messages propagating that a certain email message should not be viewed, and doing so will damage one's system. And some of the famous virus hoaxes are as follows: Apple Care, Bangkok 8.5 earthquake video, Chrome critical error, compromising video. So basically what the bad guys here are doing is, again, being very creative and crafting the type of virus hoaxes that will make you want to open that email and attachment in order to trigger that virus. On the other hand, we have Google critical security alert scam. Again, all of these viruses, ironically, take advantage of our concern about being infected with a virus by sending a false alarm that then, of course, actually does trigger a virus. Propagating and deploying a virus continued. There's our fake antivirus. A well-designed fake antivirus looks authentic and often encourages users to install it on their systems, perform updates, or remove viruses and other malicious programs. For example, an additional variant on this is you could create a fake website. It says, for example, Norton antivirus. And on that fake website, when you are thinking you're downloading antivirus, you are in fact downloading virus. Okay, so that could be one possible avenue for deployment. Once installed, these fake antiviruses can damage target systems like others, just like other malware. Fake antivirus programs of note include Antivirus Pro 2017, PC System Secure System, Antivirus 10, and Total AV. Free Antivirus 2019 is yet another one of these variations. Computer worms. Similar yet different. Computer worms are malicious programs that independently replicate, execute, and spread across the network connections, thus consuming available computing resources without human interaction. Good example of that is the Michelangelo virus, worm, which propagated back in 1991. So these are ancient relics, but still very, very useful. Attackers use a worm payloads to install backdoors on infected computers, which turns them into zombies and creates a botnet. These botnets can be used to perform further cyber attacks. So once again, we have a situation with a self-replicating program. Worms that have been popular include Monero, Bondat, and BAPI. How is a worm different from a virus? As I've been insinuating, a worm replicates on its own. It need not be triggered by the host. A worm is a special type of malware that can replicate itself and use memory, but cannot attach itself to other programs and need not attach itself to other programs. A worm spreads through the infected network. A worm takes advantage of file or information transport features on computer systems and automatically spreads through the infected network by a virus does not. So again, with a worm, you do not need a carrier file or download. It is independently activated. Worm makers include several. Internet Worm Maker Thing is one. the Internet Worm Maker thing is an open source tool used to create worms that can infect victims' drives, files, show messages, and disable antivirus software. This tool comes with a compiler by which you can easily convert your batch virus into an executable to evade antivirus or for any other purposes. And worm makers include, amongst others, Batch Worm Generator and C++ Worm Generator. Once again, much of this is available at a price on the darknet. In our module flow, we will now come to number 5, fileless malware concepts. What is fileless malware? Fileless malware, also known as non-malware, ironically, infects legitimate software applications and other protocols existing in the system to perform various malicious activities. It leverages any existing vulnerabilities to infect the system. It resides in the system's RAM. It injects malicious code into the running processes such as Microsoft Word, Flash, Adobe PDF Reader, JavaScript, and PowerShell. Reasons for using fileless malware in cyber attacks. It's stealthy in nature, exploits legitimate system tools. It is sometimes called living off the land. You hear that term often in cybersecurity circles. That means that the malware exploits default system tools. So what's already there is what it's using, thus the moniker living off the land. And it's trustworthy. It uses tools that are frequently used and trusted. For example, it might be embedding itself in Microsoft Word. Fileless propagation techniques used by attackers include phishing emails, legitimate applications like Microsoft Word, native applications, infection through lateral movement, malicious websites, registry manipulation, memory code injection, and script-based injection are all methods in order to infect with this type of fileless malware. It is called fileless in the sense that typically this type of malware just turns off after the RAM is no longer being used, so therefore evading detection. The taxonomy of fileless malware threats is, as we can see in the screen, starting in the lower left quadrant. Type 1, no file activity performed, and this is shown by those inserts that are, I guess, a lavender color. And then in the powder blue on the upper left is type 3, files required to achieve fileless persistence. That's an exploit. And type 2 is execution and injection. In this case, which is type 2, no files written on this, but some files used indirectly. So those are the 3 variations on that. How does fileless malware work? Initially, there has to be a point of entry. These include memory exploits, malicious websites, phishing emails, and malicious documents. Memory exploits typically are such that there is code execution parameters that are violated. So code execution, for example, process hollowing and reflective DDL injection takes place. With a malicious website point of entry, you get script-based perturbations, including using legitimate tools to load scripts, PowerShells, SC scripts, and VB scripts. These can further, of course, also trigger code injection, and both code injection and script-based attacks can, in fact, create malicious code running directly in the memory of the machine that's been infected. Once this has been accomplished, what we have is persistence. This can be accomplished by the registry through the Windows management instrumentation or through pre-scheduled tasks. Finally, the objective is achieved, which could be reconnaissance, it could be credential harvesting, it could be data exfiltration, or cyber espionage. To note in the dashed line on the bottom, the persistence of fileless malware depends on the goal of the attacker. Without persistence, the malicious code will be erased from a memory or system reboot. Launching fileless malware through document exploits and in-memory exploits. How is this done? On the left, we see the document exploit. In this case, the attacker can trick users into downloading a document, archive, or any attractive files consisting of malicious macro codes. Malicious macro launches VBA or JavaScript to exploit the Windows default tools such as PowerShell to continue the chain infection. For this reason, if you use something like Microsoft Word, good idea to make sure that your macros are by default turned off. In this case, we see again a flow chart for document exploits. We have a victim opens a malicious document. The document runs malicious macro, for example, a Microsoft Word document. The macro launches VBA or JavaScript, and this malicious script exploits PowerShell to run payload and continue infection on the system. On the right, we see in-memory exploits. In this case, attackers inject a malicious payload into the RAM that targets the legitimate processor without leaving any footprints. And notice again, in the red, without leaving any footprints. Attackers exploit the different Windows APIs such as WMI, PSExec, or PowerShell to gain access over the process memory of a legitimate process. So in the case of in an in-memory exploit, we see such things as Eternal Blue. This doesn't say so, but Eternal Blue was in fact the ingredient in the WannaCry ransomware. In this case, the Eternal Blue triggered an SMB1, which went to an LSASS exec. Memory injection took place, invoking reflective DLL injection. So what you have here is suspicious activity initiated by Mimikatz, which leads to LSASS exec, and this, of course, takes to clear text passwords and password hash harvesting. Launching phallus malware through script-based injection. Phallus attacks are also performed using the scripts where binaries and shellcodes are embedded, obfuscated, and compiled to avoid file creations on the disk. Scripts allow attackers to communicate and infect applications or operating systems without being traced. Here we see on the bottom chart, we see a loader consisting of malicious script files and executables and so on, and generates embedded code and downloaded code. This is placed in process memory and executes the code directly from memory thereafter. Launching phallus malware by exploiting system admin tools. Attackers exploit default system admin tools such as Certutil, WMIC, and REGSVR32 to launch phallus instructions. Attackers use Certutil and Windows Management Interface command utilities to steal information, and then they exploit command line tools such as REGSVR32 and RUNDDL32 to run malicious DLLs. Once again, we see in the lower left the execution via PSExec or WMIC or Eternal Blue runs itself using run-DLL32exe, and then we have the consequences of that, which could be disk modification, stealing credentials using modified tools, sending copy remotely, rebooting triggered after encryption or by scheduling task, and also encryption with no change in extensions, and display a ransom node. So what we're seeing here is the anatomy of what would be a ransomware attack using this type of exploit. Launching phallus malware through phishing. Attackers commonly use social engineering techniques such as phishing to spread phallus malware onto the targeted systems. Phallus malware exploits vulnerabilities in system tools to load and run malicious payloads on the victim's machine to compromise the sensitive information stored in the process memory. Again, we see in the lower left, we see the point of entry, which is where an attacker sends a phishing email to the victim embedded within a malicious link. Again, the attachment that's used in the phishing prank typically is crafted so as to be as enticing or provoke curiosity as much as possible. Typical things are something that's confidential. Once again, frequently it will be something like an email allegedly containing a table of in-house information on salaries and promotions. 2, the victim opens the email because they are curious about such things, clicks on the malicious link, and is redirected to the fake website at this point. 3, the code is now being executed. Executing the code means the website scans victim's machine for unpatched flash. Flash opens PowerShell for passing instructions through command line. This leads to PowerShell downloads malicious scripts from command and control center. And once downloaded, the script containing malicious payload is now executed in the victim's memory. Maintaining persistence, it takes place at this point, where auto start registry key is created for storing the malicious script in the victim system. Lastly, we have compromising data. The payload can now exfiltrate data and perform other malicious activities as pre-programmed. Maintaining persistence with fileless techniques. When compared to other malware types, fileless malware does not use disk files to spread its infection or maintain persistence. Attackers adopt unique methods such as developing the load points to restart infected payloads to maintain persistence. Attackers save the malicious payload inside the registry that holds data for configurations, application files, and settings, which executes itself with every system start. As we see in the lower left again, we have the attacker. They inject the malicious code exploiting server or registry entries in the local computer. This, in fact, includes PowerShell executions by the vulnerable application and installation of the malicious CEHv11 script. This triggers scans for vulnerable systems to infect them, and now the local area network as a whole becomes vulnerable. Fileless malware. We have Divergent. Divergent is a type of fileless malware that depends mostly on the registry for the execution and storage of configuration data. It also employs a key in the registry to maintain persistence and exploits PowerShell to inject itself onto the other processes. Types of fileless malware include Astroauth backdoor, Nodersock, Vaporworm, NJRat backdoor, Sodinokibi ransomware, Kofter and Parallax, Drydex, Hansator or Hankator, or Chatitor, and Sorobrecht ransomware. Fileless malware obfuscation techniques to bypass antivirus could include any of the following. It could include inserting characters. Attackers insert special characters such as COMMA, parentheses, comma, close parentheses, and semicolon, parentheses, semicolon, close parentheses between malicious commands and strings to make well-known commands more complex to detect. Or inserting parentheses. When parentheses are used, variables in a code block are evaluated as a single line command. Attackers exploit this feature to split and obfuscate malicious commands into fragments. Finally, inserting caret symbol. The caret symbol is the upside down V on your keyboard. It is a reserved character used in shell commands for escaping. Attackers exploit this feature to escape malicious commands and during execution time. Once again, the caret symbol is a reserved character for escape character, analogously to the / character used in Python for escape characters. Fileless command obfuscation techniques to bypass antivirus include also inserting double quotes. The command line parser uses a double quote symbol as an argument delimiter. Attackers use this symbol to concatenate malicious commands in arguments. Next, we have using custom environment variables. In the Windows operating system, environment variables are dynamic objects that store modifiable values used by applications at runtime. Attackers exploit environment variables to, again, split malicious commands into multiple strings. And finally, using pre-assigned environment variables. In this case, what we have is quote, %, common program, files, %, quote, contains a default value of C:\program files / common files. Quote, specific characters from this value can be accessed through indexing and used to execute malicious commands. Next, we have malware analysis. Malware analysis is perhaps the most complex and yet most profitable way in order to diagnose the nature of an attack and also its source and possible intent. What is sheep dip computer? Sheep dipping refers to the analysis of suspected files and incoming messages, etc. for malware. A sheep dip computer is installed with port monitors, file monitors, network monitors, and antivirus software and connects to a network only under strictly controlled conditions. Sheep dipping process tasks include to run user group permissions and process monitors, to run port and network monitors, to run device driver and file monitors, and to run registry and kernel monitors. Basically, what the sheep dip computer is kind of like a sacrificial lamb that you are willing to sacrifice first in order to see if there is malware present. It is for this reason that you want to use it only under strictly controlled conditions and quarantine it at all times, except at those times where you are testing or analyzing or decompiling for specific malware. Antivirus sensor systems. An antivirus sensor system is a collection of computer software that detects and analyzes malicious code threats such as viruses, worms, and Trojans. They are used along with the sheep-tip computer. Okay, we see on the left a network of 3 separate systems. The traffic is allowed to go in and out of this network. There's the antivirus system, which includes antivirus, anti-spyware, anti-Trojan, anti-spamware, anti-phishing, email scanners. This will, of course, be something like Norton, McAfee, what used to be called Symantec, etc. Once you have employed this on your system, the traffic is allowed or it's reflected or rejected back into the internet. Introduction to malware analysis. Malware analysis is a process of reverse engineering a specific piece of malware to determine the origin, functionality, potential impact of a given type of malware, also possibly to determine the intent of the malware. Why malware analysis? This has many justifications. We do this to examine exactly determine what happened, to determine the malicious intent of malware software, as I mentioned, to identify indicators of compromise, to determine the complexity level of an intruder, to identify the exploited vulnerability, to identify the extent of damage caused by the intrusion, and to catch the perpetrator accountable for installing the malware. Perhaps that is the most challenging part of this. Types of malware analysis include static malware analysis, also known as code analysis. It involves going through the executable binary code without executing it to have a better understanding of the malware and its purpose. This could include, in fact, going to source code levels and doing a line-by-line analysis. Dynamic malware analysis, on the other hand, is also known as behavioral analysis. In behavioral analysis, it involves executing the malware code to know how it interacts with the host system and its impact on the system after infection. It is recommended that both static and dynamic analysis be performed to obtain detailed understanding of the functionality of the malware. Malware analysis tools and procedures include the following. Preparing the test bed. Number 1, allocate a physical system for the analysis lab. So this is actually could be your sheep-tip. This could be your sacrificial lamb. This is the machine you're going to run your experiments on, and you want to very strictly control how and by whom it's used and quarantine it as much as possible. Step 2, on this machine, you install a virtual machine, a VMware, Hyper-V, etc., VirtualBox, whatnot. On the system, you install a guest OS on the virtual machines. You will isolate the system from the network by ensuring that the NIC card is in-host only. You simulate internet services using tools such as iNetSim. You disable the shared folders and guest isolation. You install malware analysis tools on this virtual environment. You generate the hash value of each OS and tool. Why are you doing this? To make sure it has not been compromised and its integrity has been maintained. And finally, you copy the malware over to the guest OS. Basically, you're doing everything possible to quarantine that malware should something go wrong. Once you have prepared a test bed, you can perform static malware analysis. In static analysis, we do not run the malware code, so there is no need to create a safe environment. It employs different tools and techniques to quickly determine if a file is malicious. Analyzing the binary code itself provides information about the malware functionality, its network signatures, exploit packaging techniques, and dependencies involved, and so on. Some of the static malware analysis techniques include file fingerprinting, local and online malware scanning, performing string search, identifying packing obfuscation methods, finding the portable executable information, identifying file dependencies, and malware disassembly. First, let's look at File fingerprinting and static malware analysis applications. File fingerprinting is the process of computing the hash value for a given binary code. You can use the computed hash value to uniquely identify the malware or periodically verify if any changes are made to the binary code during analysis. Once again, remembering that hashes are used primarily to guarantee message integrity or information integrity. Use tools like HashMyFiles to calculate various hash values of the malware in question, malware file in question. HashMyFiles produces the hash value of a file using pretty much all of the most common hash mechanisms, including, of course, MD5, SHA-1, CRC32, SHA-256, SHA-512, and SHA-384 algorithm. File fingerprinting tools include Mimikatz, HashTab, HashCalc, HashDeep, and MD5 sums. Static malware analysis also includes local and online malware scanning. In this case, you scan the binary code locally using well-known and up-to-date antivirus software. If the code under analysis is a component of a well-known malware, it may have been discovered already and documented by many antivirus vendors. You can also upload the code to online websites such as VirusTotal to get it scanned by a wide variety of different scan engines. Local and online malware scanning tools that are available to you include hybrid analysis, Cuckoo Sandbox, Jyoti, Valkyrie Sandbox, and Online Scanner. Next, we have VirusTotal, and this is a free service that analyzes suspicious files and URLs and facilitates the detection of viruses, worms, Trojans, and so on. Next, we have static malware analysis performing strings search. Strings communicate information from the program to its user. Analyze embedded strings into the readable text within the program's executable file, for example, status update strings and error strings. Use tools such as bintext to extract embedded strings from executable files. String searching tools include FLOSS, strings, FreeEXE-DLL resource, FileSeek, and Hex Workshop. To continue, bintext is a text extractor that can extract text from any kind of file and has the ability to find plain ASCII text, Unicode text, and resource strings, thus providing a useful information for each item. Next, we have static malware analysis, identifying packing and obfuscating methods. Attackers often use packers to compress, encrypt, or modify a malware executable file to avoid detection. It complicates the task for the reverse engineering and finding out the actual program logic and other metadata via static analysis. We could use tools such as PEID that detects most common packers, scripters, and compilers for PE executable files. Packaging obfuscation tools often employed include macro_pack, UPX, and ASPack. Next, PEID is a tool that provides details about the Windows executable files. It can identify signatures associated with over 600 different kinds of packers and compilers. Static malware analysis, finding the portable executables PE information. The PE format is the executable file format used on Windows operating systems. Analyze the metadata of PE files to get information such as time and date of compilation, functions imported and exported by the program, linked libraries, icons, menus, version information, and strings that are embedded in resources. Use tools such as PE Explorer to extract the above mentioned information. PE Explorer lets you open, view, and edit a variety of different 32-bit Windows executable file types, also called PE files, ranging from the common such as EXE, DLL, and ActiveX controls. PE extraction tools include the following: Portable Executable Scanner, Resource Hacker, and PE View. Static malware analysis continued, identifying file dependencies. Programs need to work with internal system files to properly function. Programs store the import and export functions in the kernel 32DLL file. Check the dynamically linked list in the malware executable file. Finding out all the binary functions may allow you to estimate what the malware program can do. Use tools such as Dependency Walker to identify the dependencies within the executable file. Dependency checking tools include Dependency Check, Snike, Hakiri, and Retired.js. Turning first to Dependency Walker, Dependency Walker lists all the dependent modules of an executable file and builds hierarchical tree diagrams. It also records all the functions of each module, exports, and calls. Next, we come to perhaps the most intriguing and productive type of static malware analysis: malware disassembly. Disassembly is the binary code and analyzes the assembly code instructions. So now you are digging deeper into the malware. Use tools such as IDA that can reverse machine code to assembly language. Now, quick comment: IDA or IDA Pro has been around a long time. There is addition to these types of tools. It's called Ghidra from the NSA, and it is an excellent tool for this purpose. Ghidra is Ghidra. Based on the reconstructed assembly code, you can inspect program logic and recognize its threat potential. This process is performed using debugging tools such as OllyDebug. Disassembling and debugging tools include Ghidra, as just mentioned, Radir2, OllyDebug, WinDebug, and ProcDump. Moving to IDA first, which is one of the oldest of these tools. IDA is a Windows, Linux, or Mac OS X hosted multiprocessor disassembler and debugger that can debug through instructions tracing, functions tracing, and read-write executable tracing features. Dynamic malware analysis. In dynamic analysis, the malware is actually executed on a system to understand its behavior after infection. Thus, the need again to have a well-quarantined sheep dip or quarantine machine. This type of analysis requires a safe environment, such as virtual machines and sandboxes, to deter the spreading of the malware, or once again, a sheep dip computer, if you will. Dynamic analysis consists of two stages: system baselining and host integrity monitoring. In system baselining, this refers to taking a snapshot of the system at the time the malware analysis begins. The main purpose of the system baselining is to identify significant changes from the baseline state. The system baseline includes details of the file system, registry, open ports, network activity, and so on. On the other hand, host integrity monitoring involves taking a snapshot of the system state using the same tools before and after analysis to detect changes made to the entities residing on the system. Host integrity monitoring includes the following: port monitoring, process monitoring, registry monitoring, Windows services monitoring, startup programs monitoring, event logs monitoring analysis, installation monitoring, files and folders monitoring, device drivers monitoring, network traffic monitoring and analysis, DNS monitoring resolution, and API calls monitoring, amongst others. Dynamic malware analysis, port monitoring. Malware programs corrupt the system and open system input-output ports to establish connections with remote systems, networks, or servers to accomplish various malicious tasks. Use port monitoring tools such as Netstat and TCPview to scan for suspicious ports and look for any connection established to unknown or suspicious IP addresses. Port monitoring tools include Port Monitor, CurPorts, TCP Port Monitoring, Port Expert, and PRTG's network. Dynamic malware analysis, process monitoring. Malware programs camouflage themselves as genuine Windows services or hide their processes to avoid detection. Some malware programs also use PEs, portable executables, to inject into various processes such as Explorer.exe or web browsers. They use process monitoring tools like Process Monitor to scan the suspicious processes. Process monitoring tools you can use include Process Explorer, OP Manager, Monet, Asset System Inspector, and System Explorer. In the case of Process Monitor, the Process Monitor shows the real-time file system registry and process thread activity, as shown in the caption on the right. Dynamic malware analysis, registry monitoring. The Windows registry stores OS and program configuration details such as settings and motion options. Malware uses the registry to perform harmful activity continuously by storing entries in the registry and ensuring that the malicious program runs automatically whenever the computer or device boots up. Use registry entry monitoring tools such as CEHv11 Power Tools to examine changes made by the malware to the system's registry. Registry monitoring tools include RegShot, RegOrganizer, Registry Viewer, RegScanner, Registrar Registry Manager. Turning now to the CEHv11 Power Tools, this is a registry cleaner used to find registry errors and unneeded registry junk. It also helps with detecting registry entities or entries created by the malware. Dynamic analysis, malware analysis, Windows services monitoring. Malware spawns Windows services that allow attackers to get remote control of the victim's machine and pass malicious instructions. Malware renames their processes to look like genuine Windows service to avoid detection. Malware may also employ rootkit techniques to manipulate HKey_local_machine /system/current control set /services registry keys to hide its processes. Use Windows service monitoring tools such as Windows Service Manager to trace malicious services initiated by the malware. Windows service monitoring tools at your disposal include Advanced Windows Service Manager, Process Hacker, Network Service Monitor, Anvir Task Manager, and Service Plus. Dynamic malware analysis, startup programs monitoring. Malware can alter the system settings and add themselves to the startup menu to perform malicious activities whenever the system starts. Manually check or use startup monitoring tools like autoruns for Windows and WinPatrol to detect suspicious startup programs and processes. Steps to manually detect hidden malware are listed as follows. They include check the startup program entries in the registry editor, check device drivers that are automatically loaded, as shown in the red printout, check boot.ini or BOD boot manager's entries, check Windows services that are automatically started. In this case, you go to run, type services.msc, and sort by startup type, and check the startup folder as shown in the readout in red at the bottom. On the right, we have a caption showing auto runs for Windows dashboard. Dynamic malware analysis, event logs monitoring analysis. Log analysis is a process of analyzing computer-generated records or activities to identify malicious or suspicious events. Use log analysis tools like Splunk to identify suspicious logs or events with malicious intent. Log analysis tools that you can use include Manage Engine Event Log Analyzer, Logly, SolarWinds, and Network Event Log Manager. At the time of this recording, SolarWinds would not be advisable as it has been compromised in a massive hack that is called Sunburst. With Splunk, this is a SIM tool that can automatically collect all the event logs from all the systems present on the network. Dynamic malware analysis, installation monitoring. When the system or users, retake. Dynamic malware analysis, installation monitoring. When the system or users install or uninstall any software application, there's a chance that traces of the application data are left on the system. Installation monitoring will help you in detecting hidden and background installations that the malware performs or has performed. Use installation monitoring tools such as Microsoft and Install Monitor for monitoring the installation of malicious executables. Installation monitoring tools that you could use include SysAnalyzer, Advanced Uninstaller Pro, Revo Uninstaller Pro, and Komodo Programs Manager. Microsoft Installer Monitor automatically monitors what gets placed on your system and allows you to completely uninstall it. This one is especially noteworthy if indeed it does completely uninstall. Dynamic malware analysis, files and folders monitoring. Malware programs normally modify system files and folders after infecting a computer. Use file and folder integrity checkers like PA-FileSite, Tripwire, and Netwix Auditor to detect changes in system files and folders. File and folder integrity checking tools include Tripwire File Integrity and Change Manager, Netwix Auditor, Verisys, CSP File Integrity Checker, and NNT Change Tracker. In the case of PA-FileSite audits who is deleting files, moving files, or reading files. It also detects users copying files and optionally blocks access. This is, in fact, a very useful tool to run. Dynamic malware analysis, device drivers monitoring. Malware is installed along with device drivers downloaded from untrusted sources, and attackers use these drivers as a shield to avoid detection. Use device driver monitoring tools such as Driver View to scan for suspicious device drivers and verify if the device drivers are genuine and downloaded from the publisher's original site. In this case, you would go to Run, type MSInfo32, go to Software Environment, go to System Drivers to manually check for installed drivers. Device driver monitoring tools include Driver Booster, Driver Reviver, Driver Easy, Driver Fusion, and Driver Genius. In the case of Driver View, this utility displays a list of all the device drivers currently loaded in the system, along with information such as load addresses of the driver, description, version, and product name. A quick caveat to this, as we can see with the preceding few pages or slides, what we are doing is with multi-layer dimensionality, we are looking at any changes that the system may have gone or undergone due to malware infiltration. So we're looking at all these different aspects of monitors to see something might have been changed by the malware that you perhaps overlooked. Of course, the operative assumption is it is impossible for malware to be on a system and be off a system and leave no traces whatsoever. Dynamic malware analysis, network traffic monitoring and analysis. Malware programs connect back to their handlers and send confidential information to attackers. Use network scanners and packet sniffers to monitor network traffic going to malicious remote addresses. Use network scanning tools such as SolarWinds. Once again, caveat, at the time of this recording, SolarWinds is not a good reliable source as it has been hacked to the detriment of thousands of users. Again, we can use NetFlow Traffic Analyzer with SolarWinds, but again, this is to be used with caution. And CAPSA to monitor network traffic and look for suspicious malware activities. Network activity monitoring tools include CASPA Network Analyzer, Wireshark, PRTG Network Monitor, GFI LangGuard, and NetFort LangGuardian. Turning now to SolarWinds with the previous precautionary notes. SolarWinds NetFlow Traffic Analyzer collects traffic data, correlates it into usable format, and presents it to the user in a web-based interface for monitoring network traffic. Before it got compromised and hacked, indeed, SolarWinds NetFlow Traffic Analyzer was one of the best out there. Dynamic malware analysis, DNS monitoring resolution. DNS Changer is a malicious software capable of changing the system's DNS server settings and provides the attackers with the control of the DNS server used on the victim systems. As we all know, with our previous learning of DNS hijacking, this is clearly a major situation if it does occur. So with the DNS Charger, we have a situation where, once again, the DNS plays a crucial role in some kind of compromise. Use DNS monitoring tools such as DNS Query Sniffer to verify the DNS servers the malware tries to connect to and identify the type of connection. DNS monitoring resolution tools include DNS Stuff, DNS Lookup, and Sonar Lite. When we turn to DNS Query Sniffer, this application or utility is a network sniffer utility that shows the DNS queries sent on your system, as shown in the caption on the right. Dynamic malware analysis, API calls monitoring. Application programming interfaces, APIs, are parts of the Windows OS that allow external applications to access the OS information such as file systems, threads, errors, registry, and kernel. Malware programs employ these APIs to access the operating system information and cause damage to the system. Analyzing the API calls may reveal the suspected program's interaction with the OS. Use API call monitoring tools such as API Monitor to monitor API calls made by applications. API call monitoring tools include API Metrics, RunScope, and Alert Site. Turning to the utility of API Monitor, API Monitor allows you to monitor and display Win32 API calls made by these applications. Virus detection modes. As we have seen previously, these include many. There is scanning. Once a virus is detected, it is possible to write a scanning program that looks for signature string characteristics of the virus. So this is file-based malware. As we already know, probably a file can be spoofed, so the extension on the file can be changed in order to hide its true nature. So, for example, we can take a file which has an exe extension and change it into a txt extension, thereby spoofing it. Also, you have integrity checking. Integrity checking products work by reading the entire disk and recording integrity data that act as a signature for the files and system sectors. We have interception. The interceptor monitors the operating system requests that are written to the disk. Next, encode emulation. In code emulation techniques, the antivirus executes the malicious code inside a virtual machine to simulate CPU and memory activities. These techniques are considered very effective in dealing with encrypted and polymorphic viruses if the virtual machine mimics the real machine. As I previously mentioned when we went over different types of viruses, encrypted and polymorphic viruses are some of the most difficult to detect, and therefore code emulation is a powerful tool in this arena. Next, we have heuristic analysis. Heuristic analysis can be static or dynamic. In static analysis, the antivirus analyzes the file format and code structure to determine if the code is viral. Heuristic analysis, on the other hand, heuristic analysis can be static or dynamic. In static analysis, the antivirus analyzes the file format and code structure to determine if the code is viral. Also, in dynamic analysis, the antivirus performs a code emulation of the suspicious code to determine if the code is in fact viral. Trojan analysis, Emotet. Emotet is a banking Trojan which can function both as a Trojan by itself or as a downloader and dropper of other banking Trojans. It is polymorphic malware as it can change its own identifiable features to evade signature-based detection. We've run into this several times now. Again, with polymorphic encoding, that code is changed, making it much more difficult for signature-based detection to pick up on it. Emotet is propagated as follows. Propagation, Emotet infection spreads through malicious scripts, macro-enabled documents files, malicious links, and spam emails. Targets are typically individuals, companies, and government entities. If we look at the flow chart, in a center, we start with an infection, number one, initial infection. This is typically a malicious doc file download. This leads to maintenance of persistence, which is Emotet relocation and creation of first culture source exe, and creation of second culture source.exe and obfuscation. Once this is attained, we have encryption taking place and deploying timer functions. Next, we have the stage of system compromise, where communication with the CNC server is attained and the system is successfully compromised. Finally, once this compromise has been achieved, network propagation takes place in several phases. You have the netpass.exe, Outlook scraper, web browser pass view, mail pass view, and credential enumerator, all included in the network propagation. Emotet malware attack phases include infection phase. The stage 1, initial infection occurs such that the initial infection can be performed through malicious scripts, macro-enabled document files, malicious links, and spam emails. Furthermore, a spam email is sent to the victim, which contains a malicious URL disguised as a legitimate email, luring the victim to click the link. Once again, this is done in a fairly creative fashion so that the subject or attachment is something that would be enticing to the victim to open. It's typically something like confidential salary projections for next year for a company or any such thing like that. Stage 2 of the infection phase is malicious .doc file is downloaded by the victim. When the victim clicks the link, it redirects to download a malicious pay, as we see in the red outline doc, file that contains a malicious VBA code and a macro. Next, the malware enters the victim's system and starts its attack. We have two captions, as we can see on the left and right quadrants on the bottom, showing how this looks like on the screen. Emotet malware attack phase is a maintaining persistence phase. Stage 3, Emotet relocation and creation of first culture source.exe. By default, Emotet malware is downloaded to the %temp% folder. After comparing the file path of the current process, it moves the original .exe file, which is culture source.exe, from the %temp% folder to %local app data %\culture source folder. It calls API sh files operations W to perform file relocation. This API is called in a timer callback function. Finally, stage 4, creation of a second culture source.exe file takes place and obfuscation proceeds. In this stage, the second culture source.exe is deployed for performing major exploitation functions. The Emotet developers tried to obfuscate the code by adding a lot of unused text. Here on the right, we see a caption or a screenshot of what this looks like. As you can see, a normal function splits into 7 parts, which are all connected using the quote JMP unquote command. Emotet malware attack phases maintaining persistence phase continued. Stage 5 is encryption. All strings are encrypted and all imported APIs are also encrypted. And in stage 6, deploying timer functions takes place. Emotet directly uses the API set timer to enable the Windows timer event. This callback function is called once every 1,000 milliseconds, otherwise once per second. Emotet malware attack phases, system compromise phase. Stage 7, communication with CNC server. Several APIs are called to collect system and CPU information like computer name, file system, Windows version information, and running processes. All the collected information are then structured and encrypted before using transfer to the CNC server. After receiving the transferred information from the infected victim's machine, the CNC, that is to say the command and control server, responds with the required malicious instructions and deploys the contagious payload. Leading to number 8, stage 8, system compromise. After receiving the malicious instructions or malicious payload from the malicious CNC server, Emotet upgrades itself and performs exploitation of the system. It is in this stage that Emotet compromises the victim's machine. Emotet malware attack phases, network propagation phase. This, in the last stage, is network propagation. In this case, after infecting the victim system, Emotet's second key goal is to spread the infection across local networks and beyond to compromise as many machines as possible. Currently, Emotet uses 5 known spreader modules, which include netpass.exe, Outlook Scraper, web browser pass view, mail pass view, and credential enumerator. Presumably, there are more that we may not know of. Emotet employs all or some of these network propagation modules depending on the target machine and network. Virus analysis, SamSam ransomware. SamSam is a notorious ransomware that is associated with the Gold Lowell threat group and is used to perform targeted attacks against global multinational companies. It exploits the vulnerable unpatched servers present in the target network using a range of exploitation methods. Propagation. SamSam ransomware employs brute force tactics against weak passwords of the remote desktop protocol to gain access to the victim's machine. Once the target host is infected, it performs network mapping to search other exploitable assets on that network. Encryption. It uses RSA 2048 asymmetric encryption technique to encrypt content on infected systems. This is a very strong encryption technique, therefore making the possibility of possibly decrypting your data next to zero. Symptoms. A ransomware note appears on the screen demanding ransom in bitcoins in typical cases. Structure. SamSam ransomware has three key components: a batch file, a runner, and a decryptor. SamSam ransomware attack stages, as we see in the flowchart, upper left. Number one, attacker gains access to the vulnerable server. This is the pre-exploitation phase. Next, the attacker harvests admin credentials and performs privilege escalation. And third, the infection spreads to other computers in the network via SOCKS proxy tunnels. Next, we have the exploitation phase. At this stage, the batch scripts get executed and the ransomware payload is deployed in all compromised computers. The payload gets executed and encrypts all the files. Finally, in post-exploitation, ransom notes demanding for ransom payments in Bitcoin appears on the display of the intended victim. SamSam ransomware attack stages continued in more detail. In the pre-exploitation phase, stage one, we gain access to vulnerable servers. In this stage, attackers check for the presence of unpatched RDP vulnerabilities in internet-facing remote servers to gain an initial foothold in the victim's network. Stage two, we harvest admin credentials. Once they identify vulnerable servers, they employ Mimikatz or NLBrute RDP brute force tools to harvest admin credentials and perform privilege escalation. In stage three, the infection is spread such that next they create SOCKS proxies to tunnel the traffic and exploit admin tools like PSExec, WMI, and RCP to spread SamSam to the rest of the computers on the compromised network. On the right side, we see a caption of some of the readouts when this takes place. Especially notice the PowerShell command for downloading Mimikatz on the lower right caption. SamSam ransomware attack stages continued. Next, we have the exploitation. Stage 4 deploys payload. After getting access to all the vulnerable servers in the network, a batch file is executed on all servers. This custom ransomware.net binary file, .bat, contains two embedded executables. One is the del.exe or del file type.exe. This sdeletes sysinternals program. And then secondly, the selfdel.exe used to delete its malicious activity. On the upper right, we see a caption of this batch script deploying SamSam payload character.exe. And on the lower right, we see SamSam ransomware binary. Comment. So this is a ransomware binary which you would typically try to reverse engineer and analyze using tools such as Ghidra, OllyDebug, and IDAPRO, for example. SamSam ransomware stages continued. Exploitation continued. Stage 5, executes payload and encrypts local files. After executing the binary file, the ransomware deploys encryption of the target files, matching a hard-coded list of approximately 300 file extensions. You take a look at the examples of hard-coded targeted file extensions. It is on the lower caption. I'm not sure if that's all 300, but that certainly is a good enumeration thereof. Ransomware SamSam ransomware attack stages. At this point, we have post-exploitation has been attained. Stage 6, demands for ransomware. After encrypting files, the ransomware launches Windows S-delete program to wipe the free space on the disk. The malware also deletes the main ransomware binary and the free space wiper. It then deploys another binary to delete all backup files from the local system and any network accessible drives, just in case there are backups. It then displays an HTML extortion message ransom note on the victim system that demands a Bitcoin amount for each affected system or a larger amount for all affected systems combined. If we look at the right side caption, we have SAM ransomware ransom note. Obviously, this is an original one. That's why we have the redactions to identify the victim in this case. Typically, ransomware notes are much more flamboyant with much more colorful graphics, large letters, etc., to be as alarming as possible. This one's a fairly subdued one. Fileless malware analysis Astaroth attack. In an Astaroth attack, the following takes place. First, the attacker sends spear phishing email with a malicious URL to a zip file containing a link file, LNK file. When clicked, runs a bad command that initiates the WMIC. Once again, these phishing emails try to be as interesting and as provocative and enticing as possible. WMIC commands an XSL file that includes malicious JavaScript code, which initiates the WMIC again. Next, WMIC again downloads a JXSL file that includes malicious JavaScript code that abuses system tools. bitsadmin certtil regsvr32 and the next steps. Next step, multiple executions of bisadmin and tool downloads encoded malicious payloads proceed. Following this, certtil decodes 2 downloaded payloads into DLLs. Next, regsvr32 runs 2 decoded DLLs that reads and loads a third DLL into the userint.exe. Finally, last step 6, the third DLL injects a userint.exe as a proxy that reads, decodes, and loads a final DLL, which is the Astaroth and information stealer. Module flow, component 7, countermeasures. Trojan countermeasures include any of the following. 1, you can avoid opening email attachments received from unknown or suspicious senders. Block all unnecessary ports at the host and firewall. Avoid accepting programs transferred by instant messaging. Harden weak default configuration settings and disable unused functionality, including protocols and services. Often these are turned on by default, by the way, so it is wise to take a look at what's on by default and turn off everything that is not necessary. Next, monitor the internal network traffic for odd ports or encrypted traffic. Avoid downloading and executing applications from untrusted sources. Install patches and security updates for operating systems and applications. Scan external USB drives and DVDs, or any external media for that matter, with antivirus software before using. Restrict permissions within the desktop environment to prevent malicious applications from being installed. And once again, over here, we have the ever-challenging phenomena of permission creep that needs to be strictly controlled. Finally, you can run host-based antivirus firewall and intrusion detection software to try to countermeasure these Trojans. Countermeasures to backdoors. So backdoor countermeasures include the following. Most commercial antivirus products can automatically scan and detect backdoor programs before they can cause damage. The operative word here is most, not all. You can educate users not to install applications downloaded from untrusted internet sites and email attachments. Avoid untrusted software and ensure that every device is protected by a firewall. Use antivirus tools such as McAfee and Norton to detect and eliminate backdoors. You can also track open source projects that enter the enterprise from external untrusted sources, such as an open source code repository. This is especially challenging if you have a system in your enterprise that allows for BYOD, bring your own device for the employees, for example, smartphones and tablets. This can be challenging. Inspect network packets using protocol monitoring tools also. Virus and worm countermeasures include the following. Install antivirus software and update it regularly, as we keep saying. Generate an antivirus policy for safe computing and distribute it to the staff. Hopefully they will follow it. Schedule regular scans for all drives after installation of antivirus software. Pay attention to the instructions while downloading files or any programs from the internet. Avoid opening attachments received from an unknown sender, as viruses spread via email attachments, as we have found. Do not accept disks or programs without checking them first using a current version of an antivirus program, so scan it first. Regularly maintain data backups. Stay informed of the latest virus threats. Ensure pop-up blockers are turned on and use an internet firewall. Run disk cleanup and registry scanner once a week. Run anti-spyware or adware once a week. And do not open files with more than one file extension, more than one file type extension. Fileless malware countermeasures. Remove all the administrative tools and restrict access through Windows Group Policy or Windows App Locker. Disable PowerShell and WMI when not in use. Disable macros and use only digitally signed trusted macros. Install whitelisting solutions such as McAfee Application Control to block unauthorized applications and code running on your systems. Train employees to detect phishing emails and to never enable macros and MS Office documents. Point on this, of course, it might be challenging to train employees to detect phishing emails because employees may not be quite compliant, and also phishing emails are getting more and more difficult to notice or detect. Next, you can disable PDF readers to automatically run JavaScript, and by default they do. Implement two-factor authentication to access critical systems or resources connected to the network. You can also implement multi-layer security to detect and defend against memory resident malware. This one is really, really important. Oftentimes, especially in legacy systems, the employed methods are such that the firewall is there to keep everybody out that's supposed to be out. But once that firewall is breached, it is easy to infiltrate the network. Therefore, the advisability of multi-layered security cannot be overstated in this instance. Next, you can run periodic AV scans to detect infections and keep AV updated. You can install browser protection tools and disable automatic plugin downloads. Also, you can regularly update and patch applications in OS, which again is a basic routine maintenance. And finally, you can use NGAV software that employs advanced technology like AI or ML, artificial intelligence, or machine learning to prevent new polymorphic malware. Module flow, last, anti-malware software. Anti-Trojan software includes several options. Kaspersky Internet Security is one of the better ones, if not the best. Kaspersky Internet Security provides protection against Trojans, viruses, spyware, ransomware, phishing, and dangerous websites. One thing about Kaspersky, as of 2020, the United States government pretty much discontinued the use of all Kaspersky products on government infrastructure and networks on the basis of, quote, a suspicion that perhaps Kaspersky is somehow under the influence of Russian intelligence. Kaspersky, needless to say, is very unhappy about this and took them to court. Best of my knowledge, the case is still pending. So if you're working for a government organization, you will not be allowed to use Kaspersky Internet Security on their systems. So you can use other vendors. Other vendors include McAfee LifeSafe, Symantec Norton Security Premium, Bitdefender Total Security, Hitman Pro, Malwarebytes, Zamana Anti-Malware, MCSoft Anti-Malware Home, malicious software removal tool, super anti-spyware, and Plumbyte's anti-malware. Needless to say, you do not want to use all of them or many of them because you may end up with some serious issues on your machine slowing down. Antivirus software. Let's take a closer look at some of these. Bitdefender Antivirus Plus 2019, and that would be later, of course. Bitdefender Antivirus Plus 2019 works against all threats from viruses, worms, and Trojans to ransomware, zero-day exploits, rootkits, and spyware. Other vendors include Clamwin, Kaspersky Antivirus, again, McAfee Antivirus Plus, Norton Antivirus Basic, Avast Premier Antivirus, Asset Internet Security, AVG Antivirus Free, Avira Antivirus Pro, Trend Micro Maximum Security, Panda Antivirus Pro, and WebRoot Secure Anywhere Antivirus. If you don't know which one of these to use, once again, as always, I would recommend you go to a third-party site which is supposedly impartial and objective and look for a rating or an evaluation of what these ratings or evaluations recommend as the most applicable vendors for your situation. Fileless malware detection tools. We have Alien Vault USM Anywhere. Alien Vault USM Anywhere provides a single unified platform for threat detection, incident response, and compliance management. Other vendors include Quick Heal Total Security, Endpoint Detection and Response, EDR, Defender Check, FCL, and CYNet 360. Fileless malware protection tools include McAfee Endpoint Security. McAfee Endpoint Security is a security tool used by security professionals to perform threat detection, investigation, and response activities. So notice in this case, you have a much greater fine-tuned control over this particular platform. It is not just simply detecting and blocking unwanted malware. It allows you to investigate and also tailor your responses accordingly. We have on the lower left quadrant a screenshot of the dashboard for McAfee Endpoint Security Platform. Other vendors that you could consider include Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection, Kaspersky Endpoint Security for Business, Trend Micro Smart Protection Suites, Norton 360 with LifeLock selected, and REVE or REVE Antivirus. Summary of the module. This has been a large module, but an incredibly important one. Note, we have looked at a lot, but clearly there may well be a lot of malware out there that's been created since the recording of this video. And as always, there's always malware out there that we perhaps have not even become aware of. Thousands and thousands of new instances of malware are being generated all the time, every day. In this module, therefore, we discussed the following: the concepts of malware and malware propagation techniques, the concepts of an advanced persistent threat or APT and its life cycle, concepts of Trojans, their types and how they infect systems, concepts of viruses, their types and how they infect files, along with the concept of computer worms, concepts of fileless malware and how they infect files, how to perform static and dynamic malware analysis, and explain different techniques to detect malware. Various Trojan, backdoor virus, and worm countermeasures were also looked at. And finally, we looked at various anti-Trojan and antivirus tools available for your use. Concluding this module now, we can move on to the next. In the next module, we will discuss in detail how attackers, as well as ethical hackers and pen testers, such as you plan to be, use sniffing to collect information about a target for evaluative purposes. Hello and welcome back to Module 8 on sniffing techniques. Let's get started and see what we can learn. Our module objectives for module number 8 on sniffing are overview of sniffing processes and concepts, understanding various sniffing techniques, understanding how to defend against various sniffing techniques, overview of various sniffing tools, understanding different sniffing countermeasures, and understanding different techniques and tools to detect sniffing. So, first of all, the module flow, as always, will commence with concepts. Network sniffing In the case of packet sniffing, the following takes place. Packet sniffing is the process of monitoring and capturing all data packets passing through a given network using a software application or hardware device. It allows an attacker to observe and assess the entire network traffic from a given point. Packet sniffing allows an attacker to gather sensitive information such as telnet passwords, email traffic, syslog traffic, router configurations, web traffic, DNS traffic, FTP passwords, chat sessions, and account information. How does a sniffer work? A sniffer turns the NIC of a system to the promiscuous mode so that it listens to all the data transmitted on its segment, as we see an example of the diagram on the lower right. There are various types of sniffing. Passive sniffing is the following. Passive sniffing refers to sniffing through a hub where traffic is sent to all ports. It involves monitoring packets sent by others without sending any additional data packets in the network traffic. In a network that uses hubs to connect systems, all hosts on the network can see all the traffic, and therefore the attacker can easily capture traffic going through that hub. Hub usage is an outdated approach. Most modern networks now use switches. Note, passive sniffing provides significant stealth advantages over active sniffing, as is the case typically with passive methods. Active sniffing techniques include MAC flooding, DNS poisoning, ARP poisoning, DHCP attacks, switch port stealing, and spoofing attacks. How does an attacker hack a network using sniffers? Here we have a fairly detailed flowcharted diagram. Let's start on number 1, upper left. An attacker connects his desktop laptop to a switch port, such as a Cat5 port. She runs Discover tools to learn about the network's topology. They then identify a victim's machine to target his or her attacks. Proceeding forth, they poison the victim's machine by using ARP spoofing techniques. Next, the traffic destined to the victim's machine is redirected to the attacker. And finally, the attacker extracts passwords, sensitive data, etc. from the redirected traffic. Protocols vulnerable to sniffing are many. They include Telnet and Rolgan. Keystrokes, including usernames and passwords, are sent in clear text on these media. HTTP data is again sent in clear text. POP passwords and data are again sent in clear text. IMAP passwords and data are sent in clear text. SMTP and NNTP passwords and data are sent in clear text. And as we all know, FTP password and data are sent in clear text also. So all of these are very easy to capture with sniffing. Sniffing in the data layer link of the OSI model. As we know, the OSI model has several layers, and it is noteworthy to notice that sniffing can occur at the data link layer, which is next to the most basic primitive physical layer. So this is a fairly deep ingress. Sniffers operate at the data link layer of the OSI model. Networking layers in the OSI model are designed to work independently of each other. If a sniffer sniffs data on the data link layer, the upper OSI layers will not be aware of the sniffing. So once again, this is a fairly deep embedded tactic. Hardware protocol analyzers. A hardware protocol analyzer is a piece of equipment that captures signals without altering traffic in a cable segment. It can be used to monitor network usage and identify malicious network traffic generated by hacking software installed in the network. It captures a data packet, decodes it, and analyzes its content based on certain predetermined rules. It allows the attacker to see individual data bytes of each packet passing through that cable. As we see with several pieces of hardware in the lower left, we have the Voyager M4X protocol analyzer and also the N2XN5540A Agilent protocol analyzer are also frequently used in this manner. Hardware protocol analyzers also include Keysight EVE2960B, the Stinga protocol analyzer, NetScout's OneTouch AT Network Assistant, NetScout's OptiView XG Network Analysis Table, and the, once again, Agilent Keysight Technologies H753ES. Span port. A span port is a port that is configured to receive a copy of every packet that passes through a switch. As we see in the diagram, we start off when connected to the span port, an attacker can compromise the entire network. Wiretapping. Wiretapping is the process of monitoring a telephone and internet conversations by a third party. Traditionally, wiretapping referred strictly to phone taps, but the scope of the meaning of that term has now been expanded to also include internet wiretapping. Attackers connect a listening device, hardware, software, a combination of both, to a circuit carrying information between two phones or hosts on the internet. This allows an attacker to monitor, intercept, access, and record information contained in a data flow in a communication system. In the case of active wiretapping, it monitors, records, alters, and also injects data into the communication or traffic. On the other hand, with passive wiretapping, it is only retake. There are two types of wiretapping. Active wiretapping, in this case, we monitor, record, alter, also inject data into the communication or traffic. On the other hand, with passive wiretapping, it only monitors and records the traffic and collects knowledge regarding the data it contains. And note, wiretapping without a warrant or the consent of the concerned person is a criminal offense in most countries. Additionally, in some states, you have a double bind type of wiretapping prohibition. That means to say you may not wiretap or record a conversation on the phone, for example, unless both the speaker and the listener are aware that this is being done. And this is the case, for example, in the state of Florida. Lawful interception. Lawful interception refers to legally intercepting data communication between two endpoints for surveillance on the traditional telecommunications channels, voice over internet protocols, data, and multi-service networks. As we see in the diagram, upper left, we have the legal authority, presumably law enforcement. They obtain a court order request for wiretapping. This is then presented to the service provider, such as an internet service provider. The service provider sets an access switch tap on the exchange router as requested in the court order. Then system for real-time reconstruction of intercepted data is commenced, and this is stored. Once this data is stored, central management server is the recipient, and then this, in fact, is then transmitted to law enforcement agencies that can access intercepted data whenever required. Several points of note on this. This is a type of legally allowed interception or eavesdropping that is typically done by law enforcement, including the FBI, DEA, and various intelligence agencies. A note on this lawful interception is also something called an exigent circumstances request. All your major internet providers, as well as phone providers, have a channel for this. This means in case of an exigent circumstance where there's a severe risk to loss of life or limb, the request is presented by the law enforcement agency to the provider, and they immediately have to provide, for example, in the case of an internet service provider, the address of the individual on a specific IP. Therefore, if you are on an IP, which is, of course, you would be if you're on the internet, and you are in danger of being severely injured and you report that, but you cannot report your address for some reason at that point to 911, they can go ahead and trigger an exigent circumstances request to whoever happens to be your service provider, internet service provider, and they will pretty much immediately give law enforcement your IP address and your physical address also. Sniffing techniques. MAC address CAM CAM tables. Each switch has a fixed size dynamic content addressable memory CAM table. The CAM table stores information such as MAC addresses available on physical ports with their associated virtual LAN parameters. As we see in the lower left and the lower right, we have the MAC address readout. On the right, we have the CAM table reflecting that. How does a CAM work? Again, we have a fairly detailed diagram. Main thing to note is the center column, that in the upper center conjunct, B is unknown and broadcasts to the ARP. whereas in the other cases, this is not so. Notice, however, on the lower right caption, when B is on port 2, port 3 does not see traffic to B. What happens when a CAM table is full? Once the CAM table fills up on a switch, additional ARP request traffic floods every port on the switch. This will change the behavior of the switch to reset it to its learning mode, broadcasting on every port like a hub. This attack will also fill the CAM tables of adjacent switches. Once again, if you look at the bottom, Z is on port 3. In such case, MAC can see the traffic from ports A to B. MAC flooding. MAC flooding involves the flooding of the CAM table with fake MAC addresses and IP pairs until it is full. The switch then acts as a hub by broadcasting packets to all machines on the network, and therefore the attackers can sniff the traffic easily, as we see in the diagram on the lower left. MAC flooding switches with MAC off. MAC off is a Unix Linux tool that is part of the dsniff collection. MAC off sends random source MAC and IP addresses. This tool floods the switch CAM tables, 131,000 users per minute, by sending bogus MAC entries. Switch port stealing. The switch port stealing sniffing technique uses MAC flooding to sniff the packets. The attacker floods the switch with forged gratuitous ARP packets with a target MAC address as the source and his or her own MAC address as the destination. A race condition of the attacker's flooded packets and target's host packets occurs. Thus, switch must change to its MAC address, binding constantly between the two different ports. In such a case, if the attacker is fast enough, they will be able to direct the packets intended for the target host toward their switch port. The attacker now manages to steal the target host switch port and sends ARP requests to the stolen switch port to discover the target host's IP address. Finally, when the attacker gets an ARP reply, this indicates that the target host switch port binding has been restored, and the attacker can now sniff the packets sent toward the targeted host. Again, we have a diagram on the right illustrating this process. How to defend against MAC attacks? As we see, frequently these involve some kind of flooding. First, here are some countermeasures. Configuring port security on a Cisco switch, you have the following measures in the lower left that can be used in order to defend against a MAC attack. On the right, only one MAC address allowed in the switch port. In this case, port security can be used to restrict inbound traffic from only selecting set of MAC addresses and limit MAC flooding attacks. Again, this may not totally prevent them, but will limit or restrict. How DHCP works. DHCP servers maintain TCP/IP configuration information, such as valid TCP/IP configuration parameters, valid IP addresses, and the duration of the lease offered by the server in a database. It provides address configurations to DHCP-enabled clients in the form of a lease offer. Once again, we have a diagram on the bottom that illustrates this process. DHCP request and reply messages. On the left, we see a description of each of those parameters. And on the right, we see the IPv4 DHCP packet format. Notice in the DHCP packet format, the layering and iteration of IP address conduits, like client, your IP address, server, and gateway, including client hardware address, server name, file name, DHCP options. Once again, notice the fairly exhaustive listing and specificity of addresses provided. DHCP starvation attack is interesting to counterpoint to MAC flooding attacks. In this case, this is a denial of service attack on the DHCP servers where the attacker broadcasts forged DHCP request and tries to lease all the DHCP addresses available in the DHCP's scope. Therefore, the legitimate user is unable to obtain a new or renew an IP address request via DHCP and fails to get access to the network because they have already been reserved. Here we see again, lower left quadrant, a fairly detailed diagram of how this takes place. As you can see, the user will be unable to get valid IP addresses. The attacker, on the other hand, attacker sends many different DHCP requests with many source MACs. And on the right, we see the DHCP server runs out of IP addresses to allocate to valid users. Therefore, basically, the attacker has a monopoly on those addresses. We see on the upper right a excerpt or screen caption of a DHCP starvation attack tool in Yersinia. Finally, DHCP starvation attack tools include, amongst others, Hynea, DHCP Starve, Gobbler, and DHCPig. Rogue DHCP server attack. In this case, the attacker sets up a rogue DHCP server on the network and responds to DHCP requests with bogus IP addresses, resulting in a compromised network access. This attack works in conjunction with DHCP starvation attack. The attacker sends a TCP IP setting to the user after knocking them out or off from the genuine DHCP server. Once again, we see a fairly detailed diagram showing the process of a DHCP server attack in conjunction with a starvation attack. Once again, these two often come in pairs. By running a rough DHCP server, an attacker can then send incorrect TCP IP settings. This would include wrong default gateways, attacker is the gateway, wrong DNS servers, attacker is not a DNS server, and wrong IP addresses, DOS with spoofed IP. How to defend against DHCP starvation and rogue server attacks. Enable port security to defend against DHCP starvation attacks by configuring the MAC limit on the switch edge ports to drop the packets from further MACs once the limit is reached. There's a listing of iOS commands that can be used to do that on the bottom left. Next, you can enable the DHCP snooping, which allows the switch to accept a DHCP transaction directed from a trusted port. And on this, you have the iOS global commands listed on the lower right. Note, all ports in the VLAN are not trusted by default. What is Address Resolution Protocol, ARP? Address Resolution Protocol, ARP, is a stateless protocol used for resolving IP addresses to machine addresses, that being MAC addresses. All network devices that need to communicate on the network broadcast ARP queries on the network to discover other machines' MAC addresses. When one machine needs to communicate with another, it looks up the IP address in its ARP table. If the MAC address is not found in the table, the ARP_request is broadcast over the network. All machines on the network will compare this IP address to their own IP addresses. If one of the machines on the network identifies with this IP address, it will respond to the ARP_request with its IP address confirmation and MAC address. The requesting machine will store the address pair in the ARP table and start the communication. If we look at the lower left quadrant, we see this process taking place. On the lower right quadrant, we see a screenshot or excerpt of a terminal, again showing this process. ARP spoofing attack. ARP packets can be forged to send data to the attacker's machine. ARP spoofing involves constructing many forged ARP requests and reply packets to, again, overload the switch. The switch is set in forwarding mode after the ARP table is flooded with spoofed ARP replies, and attackers can then sniff all their network packets at leisure. Attackers flood a target computer's ARP cache with forged entries, which is also known as poisoning. How does ARP spoofing work? Once again, we have a table, or a flowchart, I should say, and we start with number 1. User A wants to connect to a MAC address. This goes to a switch, at which point the attacker intercepts that particular communication and eavesdrops on the ARP requests and responses and spoofs themselves as a legitimate user. So they have interjected themselves into the traffic stream. Noticeable symmetry to a man-in-the-middle attack in this case. Threats of ARP poisoning. Using fake ARP messages, an attacker can divert all communications between two machines, resulting in all traffic being exchanged via the attacker's PC. This includes the following measures: packet sniffing, session hijacking, VoIP call trapping, manipulating data, man-in-the-middle attack, data interception, connection hijacking, connection resetting, stealing passwords, and denial of service DOS attacks. ARP poisoning tools include the following. There's ARP spoof. ARP spoof redirects packets from a target host for all hosts on the LAN intended for another host on the LAN by forging ARP replies. Below that, we again see a couple of screenshots showing how this appears in the terminal. ARP poisoning tools also include Better Cap, Eater Cap, DSniff, MITMF, and ARP Poison. How to defend against ARP poisoning. Implement dynamic ARP inspection using DHCP snooping binding table. Here again, we have a somewhat detailed diagram showing how this takes place. One thing to note, if you look at the excerpt in the very bottom right, check the MAC and IP fields to see if the ARP from the interface is in the binding. If not, traffic is in fact blocked. Configuring DHCP snooping and dynamic ARP inspection on Cisco switches. In this 4-part diagram, what we are looking at is, again, switches specifically on a Cisco platform. ARP spoofing detection tools include the following. There is XARP. XARP is a security tool that helps administrators detect ARP attacks and ensure data privacy. Other tools include CAPSA Network Analyzer, ARP-ON, ARP Anti-Spoofer, ARP Straw, and SHARP. MAC spoofing and duplicating. A MAC duplicating attack is launched by sniffing a network for MAC addresses, once again, of clients who are actively associated with a switch port and reusing one of those addresses. By listening to the traffic on the network, a malicious user can intercept and use a legitimate user's MAC address to receive all the traffic destined for the legitimate user. This attack allows an attacker to gain access to the network and take over someone's identity on the network. Once again, we see a rough corollary to a man-in-the-middle attack, but it's not quite the same. Notice that the integral use of a switch rule is paramount in this particular case. Lastly, note at the bottom, this technique can be used to bypass a wireless access point's MAC filtering. MAC spoofing technique in Windows. In Windows 10 OS, here's what happens. Method 1, if the network interface card supports a clone MAC address, then follow these steps. 1, click Start and search for Control Panel and open it, and then navigate to Network and Internet, and then to Networking and Sharing Center. 2, click on Ethernet and then click on Properties in the Ethernet status window. 3, in the Ethernet Properties window, click on the Configure button and then click on the Advanced tab. 4, under the Properties section, browse for network addresses and click on it. 5, on the right side, under Value, type in the new MAC address you would like to assign and click OK. Note, enter the MAC address number without a quote, colon, unquote, between the number pairs. This is crucial. So essentially, between the number pairs, do not include the customary colon. 6, type ipconfig/all or netconfig rdr in the command prompt to verify the changes that you've made. If the changes are visible, then reboot the system. Otherwise, try method 2, change MAC address in the registry. MAC spoofing technique, Windows continued, method 2. Method 2, steps to change the MAC address in the registry are as follows. First, press Win+R to open run. Type regedit32 to start the registry editor. Note, do not type regedit to start the registry editor. You have to append the 32. Notice also in the first case, you're typing regedit32, whereas in the second case, you do not want to type regedit. They look very similar. Then go to, as the red readout shows, on the second step, and double click on it to expand the tree. Then 4-digit subkeys representing network adapters will be displayed, starting with quadruple 0 and counting upwards. Search for the proper driver desk key and find the desired interface. Right-click on the appropriate subkey and add new string value network address, quote unquote, to contain a new MAC address. Right-click on the network address string value on the right side and select modify, etc. In the edit string dialog box, value field, retake. In the edit string dialog box, quote, value field, retake. In the edit string dialog box, value data field, enter the new MAC address and click OK. Finally, disable and then re-enable the network interface that was changed or reboot the system entirely. MAC spoofing tools include the following. Technetium MAC address changer. Technetium MAC address changer allows you to spoof the media access controller address of your network interface card instantly. Other MAC spoofing tools include SMAC, MAC address changer, as we just saw, change MAC address, Easy MAC changer, and Spoof Me Now. IRDP spoofing. ICMP Router Discovery Protocol, IRDP, is a routing protocol that allows a host to discover the IP addresses of active routers on their subnet by listening to router advertisement and soliciting messages on their network. The attacker sends a spoofed IRDP router advertisement message to the host on the subnet, causing it to change its default router to whatever the attacker wishes. This attack allows the attacker to sniff the traffic and collect valuable information from those packets. Attackers can then use IRDP spoofing to launch man-in-the-middle, denial of service, and passive sniffing attacks. VLAN hopping. VLAN hopping is a technique used to target network resources present on a virtual LAN. It can be performed by using two primary methods, switch spoofing and double tagging. Attackers perform VLAN hopping attacks to steal sensitive information such as passwords, modify, corrupt, or delete data, install malicious codes on programs, and spread viruses, trojans, and worms throughout the network. On the left, we see a switch spoofing attack. In this case, attackers connect a rogue switch onto the network by tricking a legitimate user and thereby creating a trunk link between them. On the right, we have double tagging. Attackers add and modify tags in the Ethernet frame, thereby allowing flow of traffic through any VLAN in the network. Next, we have STP attack. In this case, attackers connect a rogue switch onto the network to change the operations of the STP protocol and sniff all the network traffic. Attackers can configure the rogue switch such that its priority is less than that of any other switch in the network, which makes it the root bridge, thus allowing attackers to sniff all the traffic flowing in the network, as we see in the diagram below. How to defend against MAC spoofing? You use DHCP snooping, binding table, dynamic ARP inspection, and IP source guard. Of note in this diagram, again, take a look at the lower right caption. Check the MAC and IP fields to see if the traffic from the interface is in the binding table. If it is not, then the traffic is blocked. So once again, that's an important notice. How to defend against VLAN hopping. Defend against switch spoofing. In this case, explicitly configure the ports as access ports and ensure that all access ports are configured not to negotiate trunks. And we have the commands there. Next, ensure that all trunk ports are configured not to negotiate trunks. Once again, we see the commands there. Defend against double tagging. First, ensure that each access port is assigned with, as shown in the red readout, VLAN except the default VLAN. Again, we have the readout for the command. Next, ensure that the native VLANs on all trunk ports are changed to an unused VLAN ID. And finally, ensure that the native VLANs on all trunk ports are explicitly tagged. How to defend against STP attacks. To prevent an STP attack, the following security measures must be implemented. Number one, BPDU guard. To enable the BPDU guard on all port fast edge ports, follow the commands listed. Another thing, root guard. To enable the root guard feature on an interface, again, we have the commands listed. Loop guard. To enable the loop guard on an interface, again, commands are listed beneath that. And finally, UDLD, unidirectional link detection. To enable UDLD on an interface, again, you can use the commands listed. DNS poisoning techniques. DNS poisoning is a technique that tricks a DNS server into believing that it has received authentic information when in fact it has not received any. It results in the substitution of a false IP address at the DNS level, where the web addresses are converted into numeric IP addresses. It allows the attacker to replace IP address entities or entries for a target site on a given DNS server with the IP addresses of the server they found. Or they can say again, retake. It allows the attacker to replace IP address entries for a target site on a given DNS server with the IP address of the server they control. The attacker can create fake DNS entries for the server containing malicious content with names similar to that of the target server. Oftentimes, the name will be so similar that it will only differ by a very minute detail, such as a period, a colon, or perhaps a single letter. Notice that this method can be used in many different guises. It could be used in intranet DNS spoofing, local network, internet DNS spoofing, remote networks, proxy server DNS poisoning, and DNS cache poisoning also. Intranet DNS spoofing. In this technique, the attacker's system must be connected to the local area network and be able to sniff packets. It works well against switches with ARP poison routing. Here we have again a fairly detailed diagram showing how this process works. Notice once again what we have here is the interjection of a fake website into the diagram. Internet DNS spoofing. Internet DNS spoofing, the attacker infects John's machine with a Trojan and changes his DNS IP address to that of the attackers. John is presumably unaware of this. Once again, if you'll note, this is done through the usage of a fake website. Proxy server DNS poisoning. The attacker sends a Trojan to John's machine that changes his proxy server settings in Internet Explorer to that of the attackers and redirects to the fake website. Once again, if we look at this particular diagram, John is presumably unaware that this is happening. DNS cache poisoning. DNS cache poisoning refers to altering or adding forged DNS records into the DNS resolver cache so that a DNS query is redirected to a malicious site. If the DNS resolver cannot validate that the DNS responses have been received from an authoritative source, it will cache the incorrect entries locally and serve them to users who make similar requests. Taking a look again at the diagram on the bottom, we have a fake website, of course, again, integral to this particular type of attack. DNS poisoning tools, again, are several. Amongst others, they include the following. Derp and spoof. Derp and spoof is a DNS poisoning tool that assists in spoofing the DNS query packet of a certain IP address or a group of hosts in the network. Other tools include DNS spoof, DNS poison, EtherCap, EvilGrade, and Tornado. How to defend against DNS spoofing? Many methods are available, and they include the following. Implement a domain name system security extension. Use a secure socket layer for securing the traffic. Resolve all DNS queries to a local DNS server. Block DNS requests being sent to external servers. Configure a firewall to restrict external DNS lookups. Implement an intrusion detection system and deploy it correctly. Configure the DNS resolver to use a new random source port for each outgoing query. This one is especially useful. Again, you can configure the DNS resolver to use a new random source port for each outgoing query. Very useful. Or you can restrict the DNS recursing service either fully or partially to authorized users only. You can use DNS non-existent domain, rate limiting. You can secure your internal machines. Use a static ARP and IP table. You can use secure shell encryption. This one is especially potent. Again, using secure shell encryption is very useful in this case. Or 13, do not allow outgoing traffic to use UDP port 53 as a default source port. And lastly, you can audit the DNS server regularly to remove vulnerabilities. Next in our module flow, we're going to take a look at sniffing tools. Perhaps the most popular of all sniffing tools that most people become familiar with in our field is Wireshark. Wireshark lets you capture and interactively browse the traffic running on a computer network. Wireshark uses a WinCap to capture packets on its own supported networks. It captures live network traffic, and it has a set of filters for customized data displays can be used. Again, the parameters of these filters can be tweaked and refined, And once you get into using Wireshark proficiently, you will find that, again, the way you adjust or calibrate those filters can be extremely useful, as when you have the filters on default, it typically just gives you way too much information. So you want to fine tune those filters, and this, again, it makes it a very, very useful tool. Follow TCP stream in Wireshark. Here we show the password revealed in a TCP stream. Display filters in Wireshark include the following. Display filters are used to change the view of packets in the captured filters. As I said, proficiency in setting, resetting, calibrating, adjusting, or modifying these filters is very, very useful in Wireshark. So first we have display filtering by protocol. Example, type the protocol in the filter box, that being ARP, HTTP, TCP, UDP, DNS, or IP. Second, what you can do is monitor the specific ports by typing them in specifically as shown. You can also be filtering by multiple IP addresses, again, very useful, or filtering by IP addresses singularly. Other filters include those that are shown on the on the bottom number 5 readout. Additional Wireshark filters include display all TCP resets, and we see in each of these cases in the dark blue print the actual command that you would use in Wireshark. Secondly, you can set a filter for the hex values of OX33, OX27, OX58 at any offset. You can also set it to display all HTTP GET requests, or display all retransmissions in the trace, or display all TCP packets that contain the word traffic, for example. You could also set filters such that you mask out ARP, ICMP, DNS, or other protocols, and allows you to view traffic of your interest. This filter is the one you really end up using a lot, and it's very, very useful because, again, you could surgically fine-tune exactly what traffic you're going to be scanning. 7, you could set a filter to any TCP packet with 4,000 as a source or destination port, for example, or 5,000 or whatnot. Or you can display only SMTP port 25 and ICMP traffic as shown in that command. Or you can display only traffic in the LAN 192.168.x.x IP between workstations and servers, without including the internet. So this is interesting. So this one you can actually limit your traffic scans to intranet scanning only. And lastly, you could filter by protocol, for example, SIP, and filter out unwanted IPs also. Sniffing tools also include Steel Central Packet Analyzer. Steel Central Packet Analyzer provides a graphical console. Say again, retake. Sniffing tools. Steel Central Packet Analyzer provides a graphical console for high-speed packet analysis. On the other hand, CAPSA Network Analyzer captures all data transmitted over the network and provides a wide range of statistical analyses in an intuitive and graphical way. Sniffing tools continued. We also have OmniPeek. OmniPeek Sniffer displays a Google map in the OmniPeek capture window showing the locations of all the public IP addresses of captured packets. Other tools include Observer Analyzer, PRTG Network Monitor, SolarWinds Deep Packet Inspection Analysis, Explico, and Telesoft Packet Builder. Packet sniffing tools for mobile phones include Sniffer YCAP, FaceSniff, and Packet Capture as shown on your screen. Module flow. Now we come to, as always, countermeasures to all of these possible intrusions. How to defend against sniffing. Many ways are available, including the following. You can restrict physical access to the network media to ensure that a packet sniffer cannot be installed. Of course, what we are at this point implying is an actual hardware or a physical device that serves as a packet sniffer. You could use end-to-end encryption to protect confidential information. This is becoming increasingly popular, by the way. You can permanently add the MAC address of the gateway to the ARP cache. You can use static IP addresses and ARP tables to prevent attackers from adding spoofed ARP entries for machines in the network. You can turn off network identification broadcast and, if possible, restrict the network to authorized users to protect the network from being discovered with sniffing tools. Use IPv6 instead of IPv4 protocol is also helpful. And lastly, use encrypted sessions such as SSH instead of Telnet, secure copy, or instead of FTP and SSL for email conversations to protect wireless network users against sniffing attacks. So once again, encryption usually is a very useful adjunctive add-on to your security countermeasures. How to defend against sniffing continued. You can use HTTPS instead of HTTP to protect usernames and passwords. Again, HTTPS, as the S indicates, is typically secured either with Secure Socket Layer SSL or more recently TLS3. Or you can use a switch instead of a hub, as a switch delivers data to the internet recipient only. Use secure file transfer protocol instead of FTP for secure transfer of files, because as we know with FTP, the files are transmitted in clear text, or as we say in cryptography, in plain text. Next, you can use PGP, SMIME, VPN, IPsec, SSL, TLS, secure shell, and one-time passwords as a further layer of security. One-time passwords, of course, are the most secure, but tend to be rather inconvenient. You can always encrypt wireless traffic with a strong encryption protocol, such as WPA or WPA2. Of course, this would apply specifically to traffic with Wi-Fi. Retrieve the MAC directly from the NIC instead of the OS. This prevents MAC address spoofing. You can use tools to determine if any NICs are running in the promiscuous mode and reset them. And you can use the concept of access control lists to allow access to only fixed range of trusted IP addresses in a network. This last one is also especially effective. Module flow, we come now to sniffing detection techniques revealed. How to detect sniffing. You can check the devices running in promiscuous mode. You need to check with machines which machines are running in the promiscuous mode and appropriately adjust them. Promiscuous mode allows a network device to intercept and read each network packet that arrives in its entirety. You can run IDS, an intrusion detection system. Run IDS and see if the MAC address of any of the machines has changed, for example, routers' MAC addresses, or you can have IDS can alert the administrator about suspicious activities. You can run network tools. You can run network tools such as CAPSA Portable Network Analyzer to monitor the network for detecting strange packets. Enables, you can also, with this device, you can enables retake. Enables you to collect, consolidate, centralize, and analyze traffic data across different network resources and technologies. Sniffer detection techniques, ping method and DNS method. The ping method sends a ping request to the suspect machine with its IP address and an incorrect MAC address. The Ethernet adapter rejects it as the MAC address does not match, whereas the suspect machine running the sniffer responds to it as it does and does not reject packets with a different MAC address. So this is a fairly simple method in order to try to detect this situation. On the other hand, we have the DNS method, in which case most of the sniffers perform reverse DNS lookup to identify the machine from the IP address. A machine generating reverse DNS lookup traffic is very likely to be running a sniffer. So in this case, essentially we're just trying to detect DNS lookup functions. Sniffer detection techniques, the ARP method. In this case, only the machine in the promiscuous mode, machine C, as we see on the right, caches the ARP information IP and MAC address mapping. A machine in the promiscuous mode responds to the ping message as it has the correct information about the host sending the ping request in its cache. The rest of the machines will send an ARP probe to identify the source of the ping request. Promiscuous mode detection tools, Nmap. Nmap's NSE script allows you to check if a system on a local Ethernet has its network card in the promiscuous mode. Further, you can command to detect NIC in promiscuous mode, includes the command as shown in the bold black underneath that. Another tool is NetScan Tools Pro. NetScan Tools Pro includes promiscuous mode scanner tool also to scan your subnet for network interfaces, listening for all Ethernet packets in the promiscuous mode. To summarize our module, what we have done in this module is the following. We have discussed the following. We have discussed sniffing concepts along with protocols vulnerable to sniffing and various hardware protocol analyzers. Various sniffing techniques such as MAC attacks, DHCP attacks, ARP poisoning, spoofing attacks, DNS poisoning, and so on, along with their countermeasures. We've also looked at various sniffing tools. Various countermeasures that are to be employed in order to prevent these sniffing attacks have also been looked upon. And the module concluded with a detailed discussion on various sniffing detection techniques. In the next module, we will discuss in detail how attackers, as well as ethical hackers and pen testers, such as you hope to be, perform social engineering to steal critical information related to the target organization. Hi, and welcome back. Today, we're going to look at Module 9, Social Engineering. It is oftentimes said that in security, the weakest link is the human factor. And indeed, with social engineering, we find that it is unfortunately very much true. Module objectives on this Module 9 Social Engineering module will be understanding social engineering concepts, understanding various social engineering techniques, understanding insider threats, understanding impersonation on social networking sites, understanding identity theft, understanding different social engineering countermeasures, and understanding different insider threats and identity theft countermeasures. That being said, social engineering is just a fancy term or euphemism with what used to be called a con artist, a grifter, or some kind of scam. But in social engineering, these tool sets for manipulating people and fooling them are put to the use specifically of gaining information in order to further some kind of black hat campaign to infiltrate a network and to cause problems and to steal data and cause breaches and so forth and so on. So let's take a look at what is involved in these endeavors. Begin with, we're going to start with social engineering concept. What is social engineering? Social engineering is the art of convincing people to reveal confidential information. Common targets of social engineering include help desk personnel, technical support executives, system administrators, and so on. Social engineers depend on the fact that people are unaware of the valuable information to which they have access and are careless about protecting it. It's actually much worse than that. I saw a video on YouTube, I believe, where by random people on the street in New York were asked to tell the interviewer what their password was. And on the interview, never having met this interviewer who just said they were a reporter researching password compliance, most of these people out loud told the reporter their password. So scary stuff. Anyway, impact of attack on an organization by social engineering it include economic losses, damage of goodwill, loss of privacy, dangers of possible terrorism, lawsuits and arbitration, and temporary or permanent closure. Behaviors that are vulnerable to attacks include authority, intimidation, consensus, scarcity, urgency, familiarity, trust, and of course, greed. What is social engineering continued? Factors that make up companies vulnerable to attacks include insufficient security training, unregulated access to information, several organizational units, and lack of security policies. Also, there might be a diffusion of responsibility or accountability of the command chain in the company. And another thing is that people in general like to be helpful and like to be giving. So that, of course, plays right into the social engineer's tool set. Why is social engineering effective? As I just said, people generally have a tendency to want to be helpful to strangers. So security policies are as strong as their weakest link. And as I said, the human factor is the most susceptible factor in this regard. It is difficult to detect social engineering attempts. There is no method that can be applied to ensure complete security from social engineering attacks, and there is no specific software or hardware to defend against social engineering attacks. That being said, phases of social engineering, not unlike cybersecurity attacks, are as follows. First, they research the target company, individual, or person. This could include, as we've already kind of looked at this a little bit earlier, dumpster diving, websites, employees, tour of the company, and various other measures that are taken to scope out what's going on in order to get in. They select the target. Identify frustrated employees of the target company is oftentimes a first step. They develop a relationship with the selected employees. This relationship could go on many levels, and the point of the matter, of course, is always to gain the trust of the target. They exploit the relationship. They collect sensitive account and financial information as well as current technology information. Social engineering techniques could include the following. First, we have types of social engineering. There's human-based social engineering, computer-based social engineering, and mobile-based social engineering. In the case of human-based social engineering, you have sensitive information is gathered by interaction with the person. The techniques include many, like impersonation, phishing, eavesdropping, shoulder surfing, dumpster diving, reverse social engineering, piggybacking, tailgating, diversion theft, a honey trap, baiting, and quid pro quo. Quid pro quo is basically a tit for tat. I give you something, you give me something back. And elicitation. Computer-based social engineering includes sensitive information gathered with the help of computers. Techniques could include phishing, pop-up window attacks, spam mail, instant chat messenger, and scareware. Lastly, mobile-based social engineering. The point of this is that sensitive information is gathered with the help of mobile apps, typically tablets or smartphones. Techniques could include publishing of malicious apps, using fake security apps, repackaging legitimate apps, and smishing SMS phishing. Human-based social engineering, impersonation. The attacker pretends to be someone legitimate or an authorized person or an authority figure. Attackers may impersonate a legitimate or authorized person either personally or using a communication medium such as a phone, email, etc. Impersonation helps attackers to trick a target into revealing sensitive information. The most common human-based social engineering techniques include posing as a legitimate end user. The attacker gives their identity and asks for sensitive information, something like, "Hi, this is John from the finance department. I forgot my password. Can you help me?" Or another impersonation example might be posing as an important user. The attacker poses as a VIP of a target company or a valuable customer or so forth. For example, "Hi, this is Kevin, CFO secretary. I'm working on an urgent project and lost my system's password. Can you please help me?" Or they may be posing as a technical support agent. The attacker poses as a technical support staff and requests IDs and passwords. "Hello, sir. This is Matthew, technical support X company. Last night, we had a system crash here and we are checking for the lost data. Can you give me your ID and password?" A flourish on this is a skilled hacker will actually cause some minor nuisance or problem with the system and then call the mark pretending to be the IT person trying to fix what they just created. This, of course, is quite useful because the sysadmin or whoever they're calling is going to be about to call them anyway because they need help because there's something wrong with the system. Okay, so that's also quite effective. Human-based social engineering continued. Impersonation as phishing with a V. Phishing, voice or voice over internet protocol phishing, is an impersonation technique, electric fraud, in which the attacker tricks individuals to reveal personal and financial information using voice technology such as telephone systems, VoIP, etc. Needless to say, they could also use a voice changer on the line in order to disguise their voice, up to the point of disguising a male as a female voice or vice versa. Abusing the over helpfulness of help desks. Help desk personnel, of course, are trained to be helpful and polite. So there's already something in the favor of socially engineering them. The attacker calls the company's help desk, pretends to be someone in a position of authority or relevance, and tries to extract sensitive information from the help desk. A man calls a company, for example, the help desk, and says he has forgotten his password. He adds that if he misses a deadline on a big project, he might be fired. The help desk worker feels sorry for him and quickly resets the password, unwittingly giving the attacker clear entrance into the operational network or corporate network. In this case, of course, what the attacker, the so-called social engineer, is doing is playing upon the sympathy of the help desk worker. Other phishing examples include third-party authorization. The attacker obtains the name of the authorized employee of the targeted organization who has access to the information that the attacker wants. The attacker then places a call to the target organization where information is stored and claims that this employee has requested that such an information be provided. For example, "Hi, I am John. I spoke with Mr. X last week before he went on vacation, and he said that you will be able to provide me with information in his absence. Can you help me out?" Another flourish on this, it has happened, is that, in fact, attackers have pretended to be, in fact, there to do a penetration test on the company. They have official letterhead on the company with the president of the company's signature, of so-called get out of jail free card, and they use that to fool the security in order to get them to get access into the company. Lastly, phishing examples include tech support impersonation also. The attacker pretends to be a technical support staff of the targeted organization's software vendors or contractors. They may request user IDs and passwords for troubleshooting a problem in the organization. Attacker: "Hi, this is Mike with tech support. We have had some people from the office report, complain, etc. about slowdowns and logging in lately. Is this true?" "Yes, it has been slow lately, as a matter of fact," says the employee. Attacker says, "Well, we have moved you to a new server to improve your service. Could you give me your password so that I can check your service? Things should be better for you now." And as I said earlier, the attacker may be the very person who caused the slowdown and login. Continuing with human-based social engineering, there is eavesdropping, unauthorized listening of conversations or reading of messages, interception of radio, video, or written communication, and it can be done using communication channels such as telephone lines, email, instant messaging, and so forth. Next, we have shoulder surfing, direct observation techniques such as looking over someone's shoulder to get information such as passwords, pins, accounts, numbers, etc. As I've mentioned in previous modules, this could also include having a cell phone or a smartphone in your pocket and having the video on and just simply leaning near the person on the keyboard, not necessarily right next to them, videotaping the interaction and the keyboard keys that they press, and then later playing back the video and blowing it up, and therefore reading the keys they pressed on the keyboard, for example, in order to log in. Shoulder surfing can also be done from a farther distance with the aid of vision-enhancing devices such as binoculars. Dumpster diving includes looking for treasure in someone else's trash, involves collecting phone bills, contact information, financial information, operations-related information, and so on from the target company's trash bins or printer bins or user desks and sticky notes, etc. Also, as I mentioned in previous modules, this has also taken the form of buying used copy machines, which the user has inadvertently left the hardware or the hard drive in without erasing it, therefore providing a treasure trove of information, because copy machines may, in fact, in their hard drive contain many, if not all, of the copies they have made while they were used at the organization. Human-based social engineering continued. There is reverse social engineering. In this case, the attacker presents themselves as an authority and the target seeks their advice before or after offering the information that the attacker needs. Piggybacking, an authorized person intentionally or unintentionally allows an unauthorized person to pass through a secure door. For example, the unauthorized person might say something like, "I forgot my ID badge at home, please help me in." An added flourish on this is tailgating. In tailgating, the attacker wearing a fake ID badge enters a secured area by closely following an authorized person, that is to say, someone who is authorized through the door that requires key access. In this case, the person who's going through, who is authorized, seeing that the person following them, who is the intruder, is seemingly wearing an ID tag, is even more likely to allow them to follow them through the door without, in fact, also using their own ID tag. Diversion theft happens when the attacker tricks a person responsible for making a genuine delivery into delivering a consignment to a location other than the intended location. Most of your parcel carriers like UPS, FedEx, etc., on their websites actually have a provision for diverting a package while the package is still en route. Human-based social engineering continues. There is the honey trap. Attackers target a person inside the company online pretending to be an attractive person. They then begin to fake an online relationship to obtain confidential information about the target company. In fact, cases have occurred where the person that is targeted was approached on, once again, social media, a dating site perhaps, or Facebook, and a relationship was ensued without the person being aware that they were being played. The relationship could in fact be a romantic relationship in such cases, in order to once again get information from the target. Baiting. Attackers offer an end user something alluring in exchange for important information such as login details and other sensitive data. A physical device such as USB flash drive containing malicious files is left in a location where people can easily find it. This would be one case of baiting, but of course baiting could also include such things as various bribes. Quid quo pro means this for that, Latin. Attackers call numerous random numbers within company claiming to be from tech support. They offer their service to end users in exchange for confidential data or login credentials. Of course, this could be much more complex and more veiled, so it's not at all obvious at first that this is what's happening. And then we have elicitation. Attackers extract information from the victim by engaging them in normal and disarming conversations. Based on the victim's interest, attackers must work to target their elicitation approach to extract the relevant information. The conversations could take many more forms. It could be talking about a mutual hobby, family matters, gripes about the company. Oftentimes, if the mark or the target is, in fact, already dissatisfied with their employment, they'd be very vulnerable to another employee seemingly having the same issues with management, for example, and they're very likely at this time to have gained the trust and be able to, in fact, extricate information from that person. Computer-based social engineering attacks could include the following: pop-up windows that suddenly pop up while surfing the internet and ask for user information to log in or sign in. They may in fact say something that your connection has inadvertently, mistakenly, due to technical problems, been severed. You need to log in again. Hoax letters, emails that issue warnings to the user account about new viruses, trojans, or worms that may harm the user system. Chain letters, emails that offer free gifts such as money and software on condition that the user forwards the email to a specified number of people, or indeed to a specific person perhaps. Instant chat messenger, gathering personal information by chatting with a selected user online to get information such as birth dates and maiden names, which of course are notorious for being used for passwords. Instant chat messenger was repeated twice inadvertently. So one of those needs to be deleted from the audio stream. Spam email, irrelevant, unwanted, and unsolicited emails that attempt to collect financial information, social security numbers, and network information. And last but not least, we have scareware, Malware that tricks computer users into visiting malware-infested websites or downloading, buying potentially malicious software. Computer-based social engineering, phishing. Phishing is the practice of sending illegitimate email claiming to be from a legitimate site in an attempt to acquire a user's personal or account information. Phishing emails or pop-ups redirect users to fake web pages that mimic trustworthy sites, which ask them to submit their personal information or log in, for example. Here we have two examples of phishing. You'll note on the lower right, clicking the link directs you to a fraudulent web page that looks similar to a genuine HMRC page. Typically, the differences between the phishing one and the genuine one are very minute and barely noticeable. It could be an extra period or lack thereof in the name. Computer-based social engineering, phishing continued. Again, we see more examples of this phishing email. On the left, you see once again what looks like an activity alert. Your bank account has, for security reasons, been shut down, for example. Needless to say, most people are going to be very concerned about that because it means they can't use their bank cards. And then, of course, you can log on to this site to fix the error. Or it might even say something like, we have noticed unauthorized logins into your bank account and funds being drained. We have therefore shut down your bank account. Please log in to verify your identity so we can reset your password. That is also something that's been used. On the right, again, we see a phishing email that looks like PayPal, but in fact, it's not. Computer-based social engineering phishing continued. Types of phishing. Spear phishing involves a targeted phishing attack aimed at a specific individuals or groups within an organization. Attackers send spear phishing to send a message with specialized social engineered content directed at a specific person or a small group of people. Whaling, in this case, an attacker targets high-profile executives like CEOs, CFOs, politicians, and celebrities who have complete access to confidential and highly valuable information. Of course, in this case, whaling could include targeting you, the cybersecurity guy on watch for this company. The attacker in this case tricks the victim into revealing critical corporate and personal information through email or website spoofing. We also have farming with a PH as opposed to an F. In this case, the attacker redirects web traffic to a fraudulent website by installing a malicious program on a personal computer or server. Also known as phishing without allure and performed by using DNS cache poisoning or host file modification. Next, we have spimming. This is a variant of spam that exploits instant messaging platforms to flood spam across the network. Attackers use bots to harvest instant message IDs and spread spam in this case. Phishing tools are many. They include shellfish. Shellfish is a phishing tool used to phish user credentials from various social networking platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and so forth. Tools include also Black Eye, FishX, Modishka, Trape, and Evilginix. Mobile-based social engineering, publishing malicious apps and replacing legitimate apps. In the case of publishing malicious apps, attackers create malicious apps with attractive features and similar names to popular apps and publish them in major app stores. Users download these apps unknowingly and are infected by malware that sends credentials to attackers. To note, this is easier with Android-based phones as opposed to, let's say, phones which are iOS X. The reason being, with Apple, they vet all their applications before allowing them into the App Store. Or with Android-based stores, of course, or Google Play, for example, there is no such vetting. In this case, users download these apps unknowingly and are unknowingly infected by malware that sends credentials to attackers. We have, again, on the lower left, a flowchart showing this process. Alternatively, we can have repackaging of legitimate malware, retake. Alternatively, we can have repackaging of legitimate apps, as shown on the right side of the screen. It's noteworthy to notice that on the right side, repackaging legitimate apps, number one, there's the legitimate app developer. Developer creates a gaming app and uploads it on an app store, mobile app store. Then, let's say Google Play. In this case, the malicious developer downloads a legitimate game and repackages it with malware. So they have now altered the code on that, right? The malicious developer then uploads game to a third-party app store like Google Play, and the third-party app store now inadvertently is offering it, and the end user downloads the malicious gaming app in this case. They end up sending user credentials right to the malicious developer, okay? Mobile-based social engineering, fake security applications. We can take a look at the right side flowchart or diagram as to how this takes place. And essentially what happens here is, firstly, the attacker infects the victim's PC. Next, the attacker uploads a malicious app to an app store. Next, victim logs into his or her bank account. Malware in the system displays a pop-up message telling the victim to download an app onto his or her phone to receive security messages. The victim downloads the malicious app on their phone. At this point, the attacker can access two-factor authentication information sent to the victim from the bank via SMS. So notice what we're doing here is we're actually capturing two-factor authentication, which is supposed to prevent this sort of thing. Mobile-based social engineering, smishing, SMS phishing. In smishing, SMS phishing, this is the act of using SMS text messaging systems of cellular phones or other mobile devices to lure users into instant actions, such as downloading malware, visiting a malicious web page, or calling a fraudulent phone number. Smishing messages are generally crafted to provoke an instant action from the victim, requiring them to divulge their personal information and account details and, for example, their PINs. Here we have a smishing example. Number one, Tracy, in this case, receives an SMS text message ostensibly from the security department at their bank. It claims to be urgent and instructs Tracy to call the number in the SMS immediately. Worried, she calls thinking it is their bank, and indeed thinking it's their bank customer service number. She hears a recording asking her to provide her credit or debit card numbers. Tracy reveals the sensitive information due to the fraudulent text that she has believed in. As we can see, on the bottom is a flowchart of how this type of attack takes place. Key to this, of course, is to impersonate the bank that Tracy trusts in. Insider threats. It could be said that by far, perhaps, the insider threat is the most sinister and most potent, because by default, the insiders probably already have access and are, in fact, in a position of trust. Insider threats and insider attacks. An insider is any employee, trusted person, or people who have access to critical assets of an organization. I will add to that, it could include, for example, contractors, vendors, consultants, and oftentimes could include trusted people who are not directly employed by the company. It could be family members or friends of those who are employed by the company. An insider attack involves using privileged access to intentionally violate rules or cause threats to the organization's information or information system in any form. Such attacks are generally performed by a privileged user, a disgruntled employee, a terminated employee, accident-prone employee, third party, and undertrained staff, etc. If you want to take this to the next level, in fact, the person doing the social engineering could have, under false pretenses, become employed within the company, thereby assuring them a level of trust and ingress into the company's systems. The reasons for insider attacks are as follows: financial gain, steal confidential data, revenge, become a future competitor, or maybe they are a future competitor, perform a competitor's bidding, or public announcements. Insider threat statistics are revealing, according to a 2018 cost of insider threats study, an attack performed by employers or contracted negligence is costlier than criminal or malicious insider attacks and credential theft, primarily because they have a higher level of access that they already are trusted with. Types of insider threats could be a malicious insider. This is a disgruntled or terminated employee who steals data or destroys the company's network intentionally by introducing malware into the corporate network for no other reason perhaps than just sheer revenge. A negligent insider, insiders who are uneducated or potential security threat, or who simply bypass general security measures to meet workplace efficiency or for sheer convenience. As we keep saying, the higher degree of security, typically the greater the degree of what? The inconvenience. Professional insiders are harmful insiders who use their technical knowledge to identify weaknesses and vulnerabilities in the company's network and sell confidential information to competitors or black market bidders on the darknet. And compromised insider, an insider with access to critical assets of an organization who is compromised by an outside threat actor. How could this be? This could be through several means. It could be blackmail. It could be through some kind of bribery, or indeed through some kind of social interaction, or even a romantic relationship could serve to compromise the insider. Why are insider attacks effective? Easy to launch. Prevention is difficult. They succeed easily. Employees can easily cover their tracks. Differentiating harmful actions from employees' regular work is very difficult, and they can go undetected for years, and remediation is very expensive. Behavioral indications of an insider threat could include any of the following: data exfiltration alerts, missing or modified network logs, changes in network usage patterns, multiple failed login attempts, log-on attempts at unusual times when supposedly the employee is not even present, like on a midnight over a weekend, behavioral and temperament changes, unusual time and locations of access, as I said, login perhaps on a midnight on a Saturday, missing or modified critical data, unauthorized downloading or copying of sensitive data, logging of different user accounts from different systems, temporal changes in revenue or expenditure, unauthorized access to physical assets, increase or decrease in productivity of the employee, inconsistent working hours, and unusual business activities. In our module flow, we now look at impersonation on social networking sites. Social engineering through impersonation on social networking sites, which could be, again, Facebook, Instagram, and a number of other sites that are out there. In this case, we have an attacker, and they're after organizational details, professional details, contacts and connections, and personal details. Malicious users gather confidential information from social networking sites and create accounts using another person's persona and name. Attackers use these fraudulent profiles to create large networks of friends and extract information using social engineering techniques. Indeed, the attacker's fraudulent profile on the social network may have been on there for some time in order to make it look even more legitimate and authentic. Attackers attempt to join the target organization's employee groups where personal and company information is oftentimes shared. Attackers may may and can also use collected information to carry out other forms of social engineering attacks. So here you have an entire false profile being created specifically in order to socially engineer information. Impersonation on Facebook, for example. The attacker creates a fake user group on Facebook labeled, for example, employees of the targeted company. Or it might say something like friends of the targeted company. Using a false identity, the attacker then proceeds to befriend or invite employees to the face group. Retake. Using a false identity, the attacker then proceeds to friend or befriend or invite employees to the fake group. Users join the group and provide their credentials such as dates of birth, education, employment, background, spouses' names, time of employment, time on the job, etc. Using the details of any of these employees, the attacker can compromise the secured facility to gain access to the building. Attackers can then scan details in profile pages. They use these to spear phishing, impersonation, and identity theft. Social networking threats to corporate networks include any of the following: data theft, involuntary data leakage, targeted attacks, network vulnerability, spam and phishing, modification of content, malware propagation, damage to business reputation, infrastructure and maintenance costs, and loss of productivity. In our module flow now, we come to identity theft, perhaps one of the best known features of hacking worldwide. Identity theft involves a crime. Identity theft is a crime in which an imposter steals your personal identifiable information, such as your name, credit card number, social security or driver's license numbers, so forth and so on, to commit fraud or other crimes. Attackers can use the identity theft to impersonate employees of a target organization and physically access the facilities. There are many kinds of identity theft, such as child, criminal, financial, driver's license, insurance identity, medical identity, tax identity, identity cloning and concealment, synthetic identity theft, and social security identity theft, amongst others. Identity theft continued. Common techniques attackers use to obtain personal information for identity theft include the actual physical theft of wallets, computers, laptops, cell phones, and so on, internet searches, social engineering, dumpster diving and shoulder surfing, phishing, skimming, pretexting, farming, hacking, compromising a user's system, malware, war driving, and mail theft and rerouting. A quick explanation of war driving in case you're not familiar. Typically, war driving involves driving past a merchant's location and surreptitiously picking up the wireless transmissions from the POS or point of sale, be it Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, and in such endeavors, trying to get account numbers and other identifiable information of use for further criminal activities. So this is war driving, and it used to be quite common before we had WPA or WPE locks or securities on Wi-Fi networks. Next, we have indications of identity theft. There are many, including unfamiliar charges to your credit card that you do not recognize, no longer receiving credit card, bank, or utility bill statements, getting calls from the debit or credit fraud control department, charges for medical treatment or services you never received, and no longer receiving electric bills, gas, water, etc., or service bills. Let us now turn to countermeasures to all of these tactics. Social engineering countermeasures are varied. For example, you need good policies and procedures are ineffective if they do not retake. Good policies and procedures are ineffective if they are not taught and reinforced by employees. After receiving training, employees should sign a statement acknowledging that they understand the policies and requirements. Next, the main objectives of social engineering defense strategies are to create user awareness, robust internal network controls, and secure policies, plans, and processes. For example, password policies, periodic password changes, avoiding guessable passwords, account blocking after failed attempts, increased length and complexity of passwords, and improving secrecy of passwords are all good measures. In the case of physical security policies, identification of employees by issuing ID cards, uniforms, etc., escorting visitors, restricting access to work areas, proper shredding of useless documents, and employing security personnel are also good countermeasures. Finally, in defense strategy matters, social engineering campaigns and gap analysis and remediation strategies should be enacted. Social engineering countermeasures continued. These include training individuals on security policies, implementing proper access privileges, presence of proper incident response times, availability of resources only to authorized users, scrutinize information, background checks and proper termination procedures, antivirus, anti-phishing defenses, implementation of two-factor authentication, adopting documented change management, and ensuring software is regularly updated. Detecting inside threats is a subtle and sometimes quite difficult art. They include the following: insider risk controls. Insider data risk presents another layer of complexity for security professionals, which requires designing security infrastructure that can efficiently monitor user permissions, access controls, and user actions. Deterrence controls. The security framework must contain safeguards, recommended actions by the employee and IT professionals, a separation of duties, and assigning of privileges in a clear and forthright manner. Security professionals can use tools such as DLP, Systematic Data Loss Prevention, Secure Trust Data Loss Prevention, etc., and IAM, Sale Point Identity, IQ, RSA Security ID Suite, and so forth to deter insider threats. Finally, detection controls. Security professionals must use a variety of security controls and tools to analyze and detect insider threats. Tools such as IDS-IPS, Checkpoint IPS Software Blade, IBM Security Network Intrusion Prevention System, etc. Log management, such as SolarWinds Secure Event Manager, Splunk, etc. And SIMs, ArcSight, ESM, Logarithm, next generation SIM platforms. I would also in that list include IBM's QRadar. All of these may be used as deterrence controls. Insider threats countermeasures include the following: separation and rotation of duties, least privileges, controlled access, logging and auditing, employee monitoring, legal policies, archive critical data, employee training on cybersecurity, employee background verification, periodic risk assessments, privileged user monitoring, and credential deactivation for terminated employees. I would add to that, if an employee is laterally or vertically promoted or transferred, please deactivate their present clearances and permissions and then change them to the newly required permissions. Once again, permission creep is insidious and quite prevalent. Identity theft countermeasures could include the following: secure or shred all documents containing your private information. Ensure your name is not present in marketers' hit lists. Review your credit card statements regularly and store it securely out of reach of others. Never give personal information over the phone. Keep your mail secure by emptying the mailbox quickly. This takes place with physical mail now, as well as email. Be cautious and verify all requests for personal data. Protect your personal information from being publicized. Do not display or share any account contact numbers unless mandatory. Monitor online banking activities regularly and carefully, and never list any personal identifiers on social media. Once again, social media is a treasure trove from heaven sent to hackers. Be very careful with what you release on the public forum of social media. How to detect phishing emails. These include telltale signs such as the following: there appears to be from a bank, company, or social networking site and has a generic greeting. So for example, your bank sends you an email saying, hello friend, or hello client, or customer. There appears to be from a person listed in your email address book. Or the email gives a sense of urgency or a veiled threat. Unless you go to the site right away, it might say your account will be shut down. It may contain grammatical or spelling mistakes. Oftentimes, these phishing emails are created by foreign actors whose command of English is, to say the least, questionable. They may include links to spoofed websites. They may contain offers that seem to be too good to be true. They include official-looking logos and other information taken from legitimate websites. This they do easily by scraping websites for those logos and information and simply creating a spoofed website with those logos and various telltale signs. And they may contain malicious attachments. The malicious attachments are especially pernicious. We look to the right, we see a caption of precisely this sort of thing taking place with many, many telltale signs that this is very probably a spoofed email, starting with the generic "Dear Customer." Then there's the urgency. Your Apple ID was used into login, so forth and so on. And of course, if you do not verify your ID by logging in, we will shut down your account. That's the typical kind of threat used to instill a sense of urgency in order to get someone to click on that link. Anti-phishing toolbars include Netcraft. The Netcraft anti-phishing community is a giant neighborhood-wide scheme empowering the most alert and most expert members to defend everyone within the community against phishing attacks. So this is a joint endeavor, a collaborative project, if you will. There's also Fish Tank. Fish Tank is a collaborative clearinghouse for data and information about phishing on the internet. It provides an open API for developers and researchers to integrate anti-phishing data into their apps. Again, a very good countermeasure. Common social engineering targets and defense strategies include, as we can see from this rather detailed tableau, social engineering targets, which would be your front office and help desk. Attack techniques here include eavesdropping, shoulder surfing, impersonation, persuasion, and intimidation, or imitation. Defense strategies, of course, is train employees and help desk staff never to reveal passwords or other information over the phone, enforce policies for the front office and help desk personnel strictly. Next, we have technical support and system administrators. Attack techniques now include impersonation, persuasion, intimidation, fake SMS, phone calls, and emails. In this case, your defense would be to train technical support executives and system admins never to reveal passwords or other information over the phone or email. Next type of target might be perimeter security. At this point, once again, tactics may include impersonation, reverse social engineering, piggybacking, and tailgating, to name others. Again, defense strategies could include implement strict badge, token, or biometric authentication, employee training, and security guards. Also, I found it to be the case to run a demonstration on an unwitting employee and show how easy it was to get past them. Again, do these courteously, sensitively. You're not there to shame the employee. You're just trying to show the other employees, even somebody who is quite bright and on top of the situation can be fooled and needs to be careful. Next, we have the target as the office. Here again, we can have techniques such as shoulder surfing, eavesdropping, ingratiation, and so forth. Defense to these include the following: implement employee training, best practices, and checklists for using passwords, and escort all guests through the facility. Next target is vendors of the target organization. Once again, this would include subcontractors, suppliers. I would even include janitorial staff, maintenance personnel, and the like. These could all be possible issues. Here, the attack techniques include impersonation, persuasion, intimidation, and oftentimes it might include that the person has been bribed. At this point, educate vendors about social engineering. Also, I would add, in order to safeguard against insiders such as janitorial staff, maintenance workers, service workers, etc., it's a good idea to have video feeds on all crucial areas with regular tapes. Next, we have mailroom. At this stage, you could have theft, damage, or forging of emails as possible techniques. And again, at this point, the possible defenses include lock and monitor the mailroom and train employees at this stage. Next target would be machine room phone closet. Attempting to gain access, remove equipment, and or attach a protocol analyzer to extract confidential data is commonly the case. Also, that can be done with actual physical ingress, would be using something like Raspberry Pi, which is not a dessert topping. A Raspberry Pi is a small self-contained computer that can be interspersed into a connection platform in order to eavesdrop on it. At this point, you could keep phone closets, server rooms, etc. locked at all times and keep updated inventory or equipment if you can afford to do so. I would also advise keeping a live video feed on these premises. Social engineering targets are often also company executives. Obviously, they have access to just about everything. In this case, techniques that have been used include fake SMS, phone calls, and emails to grab confidential data. At this point, train executives never to reveal identity, passwords, or other confidential information over the phone or emails. Lastly, we have the attack point or the target being dumpsters. And of course, once again, we're talking about dumpster diving. In this case, keep all trash in secured monitored areas, shred important data, and erase magnetic media, if at all possible. Social engineering tools, social engineering toolkit, SET. The Social Engineering Toolkit, SET, is an open source Python-driven tool aimed at penetration testing around social engineering. Once again, this makes it a lot easier to do some of these things. There are several kinds. You've got Speedfish Framework, you got GoFish, Kingfisher, Lucy, and MSI Simple Fish. Once again, if you need to take a look at these more closely, I advise you to do a search on the internet for a third-party, objective, impartial, disinterested vendor that will give you evaluations that are neutral and reliable on what these various tools are and how they can benefit you. Audit organization security for phishing attacks using OHFISH, OHFISH. OHFISH is a web-based portal to test employees' susceptibility to social engineering attacks. OHFISH is a phishing simulation tool that provides the organization with a platform to launch phishing simulation campaigns on its employees. I've used this one. It's quite I would say it's fun to use, and it is very helpful. So this would be one of the methods you might incorporate into your preventative countermeasures. To summarize our module of social engineering, what have we done here? In this module, we have discussed the following: social engineering concepts along with various kinds of social engineering attacks, human, computer, and mobile-based social engineering techniques, insider threats and the various forms they can take, impersonation on social networking sites, identity theft and various forms it can take, and we also reviewed the details of various countermeasures that can defend an organization against social engineering attacks, insider threats, and identity theft. In our next module, we will see how attackers, as well as ethical hackers and penetration testers, perform DOS or DDoS attacks, that is to say denial of service or distributed denial of service attacks.